Hello everyone.
Good afternoon.
Yes, thank you. My name is Carrington Kinyaju. I'm here at the Department of Physics. It's a pleasure to host you for the Big Data Kenya 2021. Thank you all for coming. I'm very happy to have you over. I will introduce Professor who will officially open the meeting. This is Professor Paul Laki, Head of the Department of Astronomy and Space Science at the Technical University. Welcome, Prof.
Good afternoon. Yes, feel most welcome to this big data computer training, which will last just this week. But before then, I would request that we introduce ourselves so that we know who is here. You may say your name and where you're stationed, whether you're working somewhere or a student, such small details so that you start from there.
Hi everyone. I'm Asadina Kinimu, a student, MSc student at Untitled University.
I wish I could see your faces, although mine is covered. But during this session, actually we observe COVID protocols. But for the sake of that introduction, and know a little bit, then you retire.
And you can also start.
Yeah, I think.
Be loud so that they can hear from behind.
Hi everyone. My name is Yvonne. I'm a student.
At?
I was a student at Africa Data School, but that's actually the only thing I've done so far concerning this in machine learning. Yeah. I'm happy to be here.
Hi everyone, my name is Eric Meli and I'm currently working but I'm concentrating on being a student sometime this year in basic physics.
Hi everyone, my name is Moses Naga, Degree Fellow, Department of Astronomy and Physics, Technical University of Kenya. Currently I'm also working with it.
Dennis again.
I didn't hear you.
Hello everyone, my name is Joseph Molini.
You are still a student? Okay.
Hi everyone, I'm Dara, a student at Data School and intern at Calibration.
Good afternoon. My name is Samuel Kabau.
Okay.
My name is Dara.
Good afternoon. I'm Sanjay. I am currently working in the software center, but the background is in mechatronics. Yeah.
From?
Hello everyone. My name is Frederick Daniel, a student of
Good afternoon. Students. I consider earlier, the focus is really 2016 electrical engineering. We'll deal with this. Let's see how it goes. I look forward to getting the best out of this experience.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Roger. I am a software developer at Cloud IT. I also have a background in electronics and I'm one of the students.
Very good. Thank you very much. I think it's a very good mix. I think the gender balance is nearly 50-50, which is very good. Mine is really to welcome you and encourage you to use this opportunity to sharpen your skills, because I think big data skills are applicable across board, whether in the banking industry, whether it's in other sectors, research, or in any other form of analytics where data is involved. And so this is not a certificate unto itself. It is the knowledge you acquire here that will be useful to you in whichever sphere of life you are. There are people who are researchers here, the people who are already employed elsewhere. And we think that with this mix, take time to share experiences as you go through the training this week. And I hope that by the end of the week, when you will be given some assignments to do, you will demonstrate that you have actually grasped the concepts and raring to go. Your trainers, as you can see, are not gray haired like myself. They are more or less people of your age, and you should be very much at home to interact with them, engage them. I want to believe they'll create that time for you, so that at least even beyond this training, you are still able to engage and exchange ideas in ways that will benefit you going forward. I think this is all that I need to say. When you are here, observe the COVID protocols. Remember, you are supposed to have come here on 12th that week, but this was postponed because we thought that things would get very bad around that time. We thank God that now we are here. Although circumstances will force you to share these computers, but we hope that you can still be able to take some precautions, especially wearing of masks. It's a must, and all the other protocols that the government has put in place must be observed. So as you enter, of course, the masks are there, the sanitizers are there. Please make good use of them, and let us ensure that things run smoothly this week from today to the end. Otherwise, I now wish to hand you over to Carrington and his team, Boniface, and
Roger.
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 Roger, yes. But when I look around, there are people I've taught here before. Most of them, a good number are here. Or people who trained in this lab. When I look across, I see very many of them here. They should also share with you what they know. They are not coming here for the first time. People like Paul Akumwa, the very back there, you don't sit there and as if you are a student. You also participate and help these people to understand what is to be done. Because I think they can be overwhelmed trying to attend to each and every person here, and they are all with you. So please, those who have that knowledge, share with the rest, and let's see that we have a successful workshop that we will live to remember for the time to come. Otherwise, thank you very much. For those of you who are coming to the technical university for the first time, please feel most welcome. I'm sure they have shown you where the washrooms are. Those who came earlier know where you will be going for meals. But in the event that you have just arrived, I think they are here to give you the necessary support so that you partake of this in the most effective way. I don't know whether Lindsay wants to give a welcome address before we
Lindsay,
Hi, Paul and Carrington.
would you be okay with giving a welcome? Hi,
Nikita's
Lindsay
going
and
to
Nikita.
speak.
Hi,
Yeah.
can
Okay,
everyone?
okay. Welcome, Nikita.
Nikita, the floor is yours. You can proceed with your speech.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Baki. Welcome, everyone. My name is Nikita Madanpal, and I am based in Cape Town, South Africa, at the Office of Astronomy for Development, which you'll hear more about tomorrow. But I'd just like to welcome you all on behalf of the 3 partner institutions that collaborate to put these events together, and that's Dara Big Data. Some of you, I think, already know about Dara. So Dara Big Data is a sister project to Dara, and Dara stands for Development in Africa with Radio Astronomy. And Dara Big Data supports students from the SKA African partner countries. So the African partner countries to the Square Kilometer Array telescope that's being built in South Africa and various other African partner countries. Some will be familiar with it. And then there's the Office of Astronomy for Development, where we use various aspects of astronomy to try and impact sustainable development goals in a positive way. But again, we'll introduce more of that tomorrow morning with just before Tawanda Chimboza's talk. And then obviously there's also the Inter-University Institute of Data Intensive Astronomy, also known as IDEA. And they are our partners who provide access to their compute facilities, so their cloud facilities. And when you begin the hackathon portion of the event on Wednesday, you'll be using their facilities and their virtual machines to run your tutorials and to complete your hackathon task. So apologies that we can't be there with you. We wish we could be there with you in person. But of course, because of the pandemic, we're unable to travel there at this time. So yes, I'm not sure, sorry if I said, but I am a Dara Big Data Fellow at the Office of Astronomy for Development, and I'm responsible for implementing these events, mainly the hackathon. And so a brief description of what will be happening this week. Today you will hear a few presentations from some industry invited guests. It's really exciting. You'll also hear some presentations from members of these 3 partner institutions that I've mentioned. And tomorrow, your tutors will give you a few classes around various topics in data science and machine learning. And hope this will be quite useful for you as you prepare to
start the hackathon on Wednesday. So these kinds of hackathons aren't hackathons in the traditional sense where you're just thrust into the deep end and asked to sort of find your own solutions, but they're more supportive and more guided hackathons. So you'll be provided with tutorials, and your tutors will assist you in going through these tutorials. And the tutorials will introduce you to all the skills and techniques that you require to be able to attempt your hackathon task. So you'll be split up into teams on Wednesday, teams of 4, and you'll go through tutorials. And eventually, as the week goes on, you will start working on a hackathon task. And toward the end of the event, you will, as teams or a member of your team, will present, give a short presentation on behalf of your team, a 5-minute or so presentation showing us your results or presenting to the judging panel, and we'll then award some prizes. And you'll also have an opportunity at the end of the event and in a Ask Me Anything session where you'll be able to just network and talk to us and the rest of the judging panel and find out more. Just if you have any other questions that were unanswered by then. So yes, I wish you a really good event. I wish we were there with you. And my advice would be to learn from each other, from your tutors, from the speakers, and most importantly, to enjoy yourselves. Like I said, this is meant to be, to improve your data science and machine learning skills in a very friendly and supportive environment. So I hope you all have a good event, and we'll chat soon. Thank you.
Sorry, Nikita, there's a up there. Yeah. Can you hear us now?
Did it cut off?
Okay. Yeah, it's audible.
Wait, sorry, at what point did it cut off? I don't know where to start from.
It's okay, Nikita. I think it was towards the end.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I would just wish everyone the best for the event. That's all.
Yeah.
And enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nikita. Next is going to be Ms. Lindsay Stiller. Lindsay is a Wrangling illustrator at the University of Manchester. She is in charge of development of Africa with radio astronomy, which is a program to help use radio astronomy in Africa for the development of skills and infrastructure related to technology and science. Welcome, Lindsay.
Thanks, Carrington. Really good to see you all. I'm not going to say very much because Nikita's covered it all, but welcome. I'm really pleased that you're all here. If you have any problems at all, you all know how to get in touch with me. Please just let me know or let the tutor know if you have any problems. And I hope you really, really enjoy the week and get a lot out of it. We're really excited to have this event and have you all here with us. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. Next, we are going to have a series of talks, talks from academia, talks from industry. There will be a list of these talks just to tell you about the relationship between big data and various spheres of industry, academia, especially astronomy and astrophysics, where the manipulation of data has become extremely important. Again, from industry, we are going to have a series. Yes.
Can we please ask the participants to please fill in the prevents before we start the talk?
Okay.
So
Thank you, Nikita.
Nikita.
Yeah. Nikita has just reminded me that there is a pre-event survey that all of you need to fill. If you check your email addresses, you will have it. Please fill it up for us so that we can use it to improve more events and just as a gauge for your skills and level of it. Please check your email address. Just to check, do all of you have internet connection in your desktops? For those of you using desktops. Okay, you have 20 minutes to do the survey and then we'll start at 15. No, 20. Let's start at 2. Yes, Eric.
So is there anyone who has not received the pen, book, or a t-shirt?
Also, just a bit of logistics. We will start at 9 and at 5, as you have seen in your programs, for the days of Tuesday through Friday. You will be reimbursed for your travel allowance on Friday, end of program, Friday around 4 or 5. So please don't leave before being reimbursed on Friday. And please be early for your meetings. Thank you. In case of any issues, please talk to me. Whether you don't have internet, if you're struggling with internet, if you're struggling with audio, if you're struggling with anything, please let us know. Thank you. Hey, Lindsay, we are ready.
Great, thanks, Carrington.
I'm Anna Skane from the Jodrell Rank Centre for Astrophysics at the University of Manchester. And today I'm going to be talking about what is data science. So one of the first things that people should realise is that data science is not new. We often talk about it like it's a new thing because it's become, a buzzword on the internet. But data science has been around for a long time. One of the things that has changed is that business has suddenly realised the financial value of data science. And that has led to a massive increase in the recognition of data science and the technical skills required for data science. And it's also led to the emergence of data science as a career in its own right. And that's really something that's happened over about the last decade. And it's led to the idea of the unicorn. Now, the unicorn is, in principle, a mythical beast. And that's why they say that the perfect data scientist is a unicorn, because the perfect data scientist doesn't exist. But at the same time, everyone is searching for unicorns because everyone wants to employ the best data scientist for their business or for their research lab or for whatever project they happen to be working on. So although the term unicorn is used because unicorns are considered to be mythical, I would argue that unicorns can exist, but only under a certain set of circumstances. So one of the diagrams you often see used to represent the different facets of data science is this one. Because data science is not just about writing code, it's not just about computer science or software development. It's about writing code that analyzes data. So that requires mathematics, statistics, data handling, and for interpreting those data and extracting valuable information from them, you really have to understand the data you're working with. And that requires subject matter expertise, which is usually referred to as domain expertise in data science. Now, there's a common misconception that data science and machine learning are basically the same thing. But as you can see from this diagram, machine learning is actually only one small part of data science. Now, to be a data scientist, you don't need to do all of these things. You don't need to be an expert in computer science and an expert in statistics and an expert in machine learning and an expert in some particular subject. You can be a data scientist and work in just one region of this diagram, but you're still a data scientist. The unicorn sits at the overlap, the confluence of all of these different aspects. So a unicorn, in principle, is someone who can do all of these things at an expert level, which to me suggests that unicorns can exist, but they can only exist within their own domain, because that subject matter expertise is the key thing that most career data scientists may lack, because they have to move between domains to apply their expertise in different areas. But for those data scientists who do move between different subject areas, that may not make them a unicorn, but it doesn't mean that their expertise isn't useful, because many of the techniques that are used in data science are translatable between different fields, which is why it's one of those kind of career paths that allows you to work in many different areas. So a good example of this in research are the three areas covered by the Dara Big Data project. Now, Dara Big Data was founded as part of the Square Kilometre Array project, or to support the development of communities to use the Square Kilometre Array radio telescope. And the reason why data science is important for the SKA is that radio telescopes, modern radio telescopes, are big data machines, and they require a significant volume of data analytics in order to extract scientifically valuable information from the data that they collect. And given the volume of data that we receive from radio telescopes these days, the techniques that we use are the same techniques that get used across different areas of data science. For example, machine learning. So one of the things that radio telescopes are used for is for examining populations of different astronomical systems that tell us about how the universe was formed and evolved. Now, those populations of objects don't come ready prepared. So when the telescope looks at the sky, it performs a survey. It images a large area of the sky. And from that large area image, all of the interesting objects have to be identified, and then they have to be classified in order to put them into the right population for the right analysis. Now, that kind of data science typically relies on the same kinds of machine learning algorithm that you use for image recognition on, for example, Google image search. So it's often based on, for example, a convolutional neural network. And that's what you can see here on the right-hand side. This is an example of how you might use a convolutional neural network to extract different areas of interest, so identify objects in an image, and then put those through a classifier to form an astronomical catalogue. Now, for telescopes like the SKA and the new Meerkat telescope in South Africa, the data sets are so large that that kind of analysis can't be done by hand anymore. It can't be done by eye. And so there need to be algorithms in place that can automatically identify and classify all of the objects in our astronomical images and automatically generate catalogues of those sources, including their classifications. Now, that kind of analysis, already you can see the parallels to other areas because convolutional neural networks are used in many different areas of life. But there are some fields where the analysis methods are more similar than others. And one of those fields is in sustainable agriculture. So, for example, the telescopes that we use to look up at the sky work in very similar ways to the satellites that we also use to look down at the Earth. Not only are they image-based, but they also use spectral analysis, so different frequency bands. And so the analytics tools that you can use for astronomy analysis are quite analogous to the tools that you can use for example, mapping crops on the surface of the Earth. So measuring crop yields, for example, or if you wanted to look at studies that help with natural disasters, so measuring floodwater extent or measuring earthquake damage. Those kinds of analyses rely on very similar techniques. And so the Dara Big Data project also works in sustainable agriculture because we believe that sharing the skills between these two different fields can be valuable and help advance both of them at the same time. A third field that also employs very similar data analytics is medical research or medical imaging research. And in fact, there's a very long history of interaction between radio astronomy and medical imaging. Some of the first imaging algorithms that were used for example, MRI scans, so magnetic resonance imaging and tomographic medical imaging were actually developed through radio astronomy. And in fact, the techniques themselves built upon the principles of what's called Earth rotation aperture synthesis, which was a technique that was developed in radio astronomy. But to give you a more up-to-date example of some similar data analytics, and this is a much more specific example than I showed you for agriculture, you can see the image in the top right here. Now, this is a CT scan through someone's chest. So this is going vertically through someone's chest and we're looking down on it. And what you can see here, this is the spinal column and this is the heart. And the lungs are these dark patches either side. And you can probably see that there's this sort of circular feature here and another one here. Now, these are the aorta. So this is where it's ascending through the heart and here's where it's descending. Now, this particular CT scan comes from a lung cancer patient. Now, one of the complications for lung cancer patients that affects their treatment is the presence of calcifications in the aorta. And those calcifications are what you can see in white, forming the circle here and here. So that's not the aorta itself, it's a calcification on the inside of the aorta. So one of the things that lung cancer researchers are very interested in is automatically detecting and measuring aortic calcifications from these kinds of CT scans. Now you can see that whilst it is kind of a circular shape, it's a patchy circular shape, so it's not the simplest thing to extract from what is quite a complex image. And so the machine learning techniques that have been developed to do this are very specific to that kind of morphology. However, it's also a morphology that we find in astronomy. And you can see at the bottom here, I've zoomed in on an aortic calcification. So you can still kind of see the circular shape here. And on the right-hand side, this is what's called a gravitational lens, which is an astronomical phenomenon that's caused by the bending of light due to gravity. And whilst astronomers want to extract gravitational lenses from their images, medical researchers want to extract aortic calcifications, but the algorithms that can be used are very similar, especially in the cases where, in fact, the measurement itself has also been made in a similar way. So again, the Dara Big Data Project is also working with medical researchers to understand how we can develop and translate techniques between radio astronomy and medical research, as well as agriculture. One of the other things that astronomy, agriculture, and health have in common, apart from the similarities between the way the data are measured and the way the data are analysed, is that these days they're all fields where there is a huge volume of data emerging. And that data is not only large in size, it's also highly complex, containing lots of different types of information. And in many cases, it's coming in a very rapid time stream. So, for example, radio astronomy looks at what are called transient objects, so astronomical phenomena that happen on very short timescales. And for that, the data has to be analysed in real time. And there are many other applications where the same thing is true. So these are all examples of what we would call big data these days. And in fact, the Square Kilometre Array telescope is probably going to be one of the biggest big data machines in the world. It's so huge in terms of its data rate that it's been described not only as big data, but as extreme data. So what do we mean when we say big data? It's again, like data science, it's a term that we probably hear a lot. It's a bit of a buzzword. And it's not that old. So the term big data first came from a management consultancy report by a company called Gartner. And they said that big data is high volume, velocity, and variety information assets that demand cost-effective, innovative forms of information processing for enhanced insight and decision-making. And this is what often gets abbreviated to the 3 V's of big data: volume, velocity, and variety. So big data is not just having a lot of data, it's also about the type of data you have and how rapidly those data are arriving. Now, those 3 V's hide a lot of complexity. So if we start with the sort of the simple breakdown of the 3 V's, which are that when you're working with big data, you need to be able to deal with large data sets, you need to be able to deal with fast data, and you need to be able to deal with combinations of data, then really that means that there's a whole pyramid of infrastructure that you need in order to do that. From a research perspective, the first thing you need is computing. So if you're dealing with large volumes of data, especially if you're using machine learning, you're going to need a suitable computing infrastructure to support that analysis. And that can take many forms. So one of the ones we're most familiar with these days is cloud, which is one of the most widely used commercial options for computing with big data. But depending on the problem, you may find that high performance computing, HPC, is best suited for your problem. High throughput computing may be the best option. And whilst cloud is a particular type of platform, grid computing is also very effective for many different types of data analysis. So that computing doesn't only have to take one form. Having access to heterogeneous computing is quite useful on occasion. But if you've got some computing, then again, you need to be able to do something with it. And that's where the data science comes in. So data science is part of big data, if you like. It's the bit that allows you to take the information out of the data. And without it, you can have all of the data you like and all of the computing you like, but without the data science, you're going to be stuck. And again, that data science itself is broken down into many different aspects. So here I've highlighted machine learning, statistical analysis, and one aspect that often gets forgotten, and that's data wrangling. Now, data wrangling, which is the process of making the data suitable for the problem that you want to analyze, is probably the most important step in most data science. And if you're working with real data, data wrangling is what's going to take up most of your time. But that time investment is definitely worth it. And one of the reasons that that time investment is worth it is because often the value in the data science comes not from the algorithms or from the code, it comes from the data set. And certainly in terms of business value, many data-based businesses these days are valued on the value of their data, not on the value of their software. And I think that's summarized in this quote from James Governor, which I really like, who said that data matures like wine, applications like fish. So if getting your data correct is so important, you may be asking, what is a data wrangler? Well, the data wrangler is the person who does all of the preparation. Now, they may be the same person who writes the code to do the analysis, or they may be someone completely separate. A data wrangler can be a career in itself. And again, it's a multifaceted thing. It has multiple components to this job. So data wranglers will clean the data, they will edit the data, they will collect the data, they will curate the data and make it available in forms that can be used for analysis. Don't underestimate how important that is. They will perform any pre-processing steps that are required to go into the analysis. And for problems that require more than one source of information, they're also the people who will fuse data sets together. So all of these different steps are absolutely essential for extracting the maximum amount of information possible out of your data set and your algorithm. But I'd also like to share with you another quote, which I think is quite telling. And the quote is, "Torture the data and it will confess to anything." And this quote encapsulates the potential for misuse of data in data science. Misuse of data and misuse of statistics. When you have such huge volumes of data as are being produced by scientific facilities or by commercial entities like Facebook, Google, those kinds of things, then there's a massive potential for misuse of that data. Now, that misuse may be intentional, you'd hope not, but it may also be accidental. Which is why I wanted to end the talk by talking about responsible data science. So responsible data science to me is not simply about publishing your results. It's about making your results reproducible as far as possible. Now, historically, that's been quite difficult because how do you get hold of someone else's code? How do you get hold of the data? How do you reproduce someone's results? And even if you get the data and the code, how do you make it work on your computer? So there are a number of different aspects to reproducible data science. But these days, fortunately, there are quite a lot of tools to help you. And I've highlighted a couple down here. I could have added some more logos, maybe I should have done. But hopefully everyone recognizes the symbol on the left, which is the GitHub symbol. So open code repositories are incredibly helpful for reproducing results. But as I said, open code won't necessarily run on your machine if you don't have the correct environment. So containerization techniques such as Docker or Singularity, which is the symbol on the right, are also very, very important these days. And then when it comes to accessing the data, the principles of fair open data are to make it as open as possible. Now, sometimes it's not possible to make your data accessible to everyone. If your data is, a petabyte in size, that's literally impossible for most people to download onto their local machine. But if your data is of a suitable size, if it doesn't have privacy issues, then I would urge you to make it open. And again, there are tools that can help you with that. So things like the Zenodo data repository allow you to host your data publicly online. And not only do they allow you to host it, but they'll also give you a DOI for your data so that people can cite a data set directly. So it doesn't need to be in a publication for your data to be cited. And I think that's very important. So I hope that this talk has been helpful, useful. Perhaps you knew it all, perhaps it's all new. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoy the hackathon. And I would like to thank the partners for the hackathon, including the Office of Astronomy for Development and IDEA, who provide access to the LiFu cloud. I wish you all a happy hack.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. Thank you very much, Prof. Next, we are going to have a live Zoom talk by Dr. Kagonya Awori.
We're slightly early and Kagonya's not with us just yet. So maybe if participants just want to maybe have a quick chat about the talk they've just seen.
Oh, but we have Sam with us. Is it okay if we?
Oh, is he? Sam's here already, is he? Well, it's Kagonya next on the timetable, but she's not joined us just yet because her time is at past.
Yeah. Okay. So we can talk about the Prof's presentation.
Yeah, if anybody
first,
has any questions about the presentation, maybe.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Lindsay. Are there any questions about the presentation? Anything that you wanted to know about Prof personally or about machine learning? It was basically an introduction to data science, which we're going to do tomorrow. But is there any questions? I'm sorry for the people at the back. I know the sound quality is not as good as we would have wished. But yeah, if you have any questions, please address them to us. Are there any questions? You can come and ask here too. If you're interested in Dara, development of Africa with radio astronomy, development of Africa with radio astronomy, big data, Dara big data, which is a sister organization of Dara, you can also ask about it, especially for physics people, but also computing people in the room. You can also ask. Opportunities for scholarships, everybody is interested in a master's, PhD. You can also ask. Just if you seem interested. Any questions? Or something interesting you picked out? Yes. Yes, you don't have any. Moses, anything you picked up that you thought was interesting? Yes, yes.
Usually the question they ask us anytime we present something in astronomy, they will ask you the impact of this to the society. First of all, I want to say thank the presentation, Professor. Yeah, yes. Because I've seen some, I've seen maybe agriculture has been highlighted there. I've also seen health sector. The question is, do you have only these ones? Maybe only two. Because it is the question of anytime you have something in astronomy or you're doing research in the CPT, they will ask you, how will this one impact the society? Because all the time is things about telescopes and all that, big data. So do we have any other, apart from markets and health, anything you might think of it that a common man will understand? Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Moses, for your question. You are addressing or Lindsay. Lindsay, can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah, there's a participant, Moses Langa, asking about the applications, because it is a typical question when you are presenting your astronomy project or astronomy thesis. How, especially in Africa, how will this help our people? How will this help the country? How will this help the continent? He has seen that there are possible applications. There are applications in agriculture, for example, and in health. He is interested in knowing whether there are other possible applications of data science methods apart from agriculture and health.
Yes, I mean, those are the strands that Dara Big Data focuses on, but this is a very multidisciplinary area, and these skills can be translated across many areas. I think that Sam from Mari and Kagonya from Mari will very much cover the many applications of data science in Africa. So I might wait until they start their talks. I think they will give a much better answer to that question than I can. I think Kagonya is with us now, actually. Can you hear me, Kagonya?
Yes, I can.
Lovely. Are you able to see if you can just share your screen?
Sure thing. Let me do that. There's one more thing I need to share. Great. Are you able to see the screen?
Yes, we can see slides.
Yes. Yes.
Carrington, can you hear everything okay there? Can you hear Kagonya speak?
Yes, we can hear her.
Okay.
Welcome, Dr. Kagonya. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm putting myself on silent.
Carrington, can you just do a very quick introduction?
Okay. Dr. Kagonya is from Microsoft Africa Research Institute. She's a machine learning specialist. Together with Sam here, you will hear more from Sam in person. So please listen to Dr. Kagonya. Welcome, Dr. Kagonya.
Thank you very much. I know I'm a bit early for time, so do we give you guys 5 minutes, or should I just go ahead?
If you don't mind just going ahead, that would be fine, because we're a little ahead of time. So if that's okay with you.
Okay.
And it will also help with the questions. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, sure thing. Great. So I want to leave some time for questions. So I'm just going to use my timer right here. Great. But yeah, so great to be here with you all. Yes, my name is Kagonya. So I'm not really a machine learning specialist. Actually, my specialty is in human-computer interaction. And HCI, as we call it, HCI, you would say, is like the mother of user experience, right? And how we relate a lot with, when it comes to working with ML and AI engineers, the beauty of human-computer interaction is that it brings in that whole element of design, the whole element of social sciences, and of course, computer engineering as well. We intersect when it comes to how HCI works with AI. And working together in a team, like, I work really well with Samuel and other experts in ML, is because we bring a certain lens to how we can build technology. And in fact, that's why I'm so excited to have this chat with you guys today around ethics, because ethics indeed, as we all know, is quite a key concern when we look at machine learning, when we look at AI. Ethics is a key concern. So I'm going to talk about ethics from the lens of design. So ethics by design. And again, it's from my field, which is HCI. And we're just going to discuss a few things here and there. So I'm going to chat for about like 20 minutes. Then I'd like us to have like 10 minutes on questions, whether it's about this topic in particular, or even about Mari, where I work. Great. So I like definitions. And so I'm just going to start with a definition. When we think about ethics by design, sometimes the first question people ask is, what's ethics? And before I go into that, I forgot I put this slide in here. I'm just going to talk about 2 seconds on what MARI is. So MARI is the Microsoft Africa Research Institute. And our mission is to understand, build, and deploy innovative cloud and AI technologies, which not only address opportunities in Africa, but want to address them at scale. So we want to create solutions for Africa that can transcend to the rest of the world. And a key thing for us over here is scale. So when we think about the solutions that we build at Microsoft, we are really interested in ensuring that every person and every organization is empowered to do better and to do more. Our key areas right now actually are health, work, and society. So society is this catch-all domain, which really can look at, say, whether it's entertainment or any other area. But work, we're thinking about, what does future of work mean? What does productivity mean for the continent?
Dr. Kagonya, sorry, could you please put your slides on full screen so that the students
can... Okay. Oh, are you, oh, what, I think you guys are seeing, I think this is the problem.
Yeah.
Wait, has that worked?
Yeah, it has worked. Thank you very much.
Okay, perfect. So then to navigate that, I think, let me do this. I'm using 2 screens on my end, so that might be a bit confusing. Yes, so I was just discussing MARI, right? Talking about who we are as MARI and our different areas. So there's health, work, and society. Work looks at productivity. Health is what you're thinking around here. So we're looking at, what can we do in this sector called health? How can we create smart and innovative technologies when it comes to cloud and AI tech? And then society is this catch-all sort of category that we're going to allow us to do more work, whether it's, with the youth, with entertainment, or whatever else that can fit in. And we can discuss MARI later. So I'm very happy to answer your questions around MARI later on. But really what I wanted us to talk about is ethics. And ethics is not even, I can't really think of ethics as a topic or a conversation. It's a concern that every single computer engineer should have. Yeah, so all of us in the room, whatever our domains and our focus are in terms of computer engineering, we really need to think of ethics as a concern. So ethics is a global concern in tech, which at the bare minimum must support every individual's dignity. And I just love this definition, because if you ever wonder why we should build ethical technology, it's because the users of our tech, the businesses that use our tech, we need to support their dignity. So if we look at now like a bigger and a broader definition of, so what does this really mean? And I'm just going to focus on the text here that I've highlighted in bold. So we think around privacy. So privacy is one arm of ethics. It's not everything to do with ethics, because I've been in conversations where people always confuse ethics and privacy. Privacy is just one tiny part of ethics. We need to explore other parts of ethics, like autonomy, right? How are we supporting individuals with autonomy when I'm thinking about the technology that we're building for them? We need to think around stigmatization. Yes, can you believe that when you're thinking around tech, we have to think around, are the technologies we're building, are they stigmatizing particular communities, differentializing particular people? Are we excluding people through the technologies we're building? Think around human contact, which has become, again, a topic that has come to the fore during COVID, and individual or communal approaches to how people explore their lives. And I made sure to add communal here, because when you're building for communities in our region, we're building for communities, when you're building for Africa, we always have to think about communal communal use of technology, not just individuals, because that's how we have organized ourselves into communities. And lastly, affordability, right? And I'm just going to jump into an example here. So this is my friend Nigeria, and the other day she was complaining about the fact that she's attended some virtual conferences and become excluded by the very fact that the technology used by those conferences do not accommodate a mobile first experience for us, right? So you end up being locked out the same way pre-COVID, when we used to travel. Sometimes you're locked out of a particular country because you can't get the visas in time. I don't know how many of you have had to be delayed to attend a conference because you've not got the visa, or it's such a lengthy process, and you end up missing out on these particular conversations simply because of the geographical location of particular conferences. So even when you look at these virtual spaces that we build, even when you look at the technologies that we build, unfortunately, these very technologies can almost be like some exclusionary factor because you're not thinking about who's using the technology, and instead you're creating, like bandwidth hungry apps, right? Where you're not even able to get that full experience because it was not thought through around how this technology is used. So these are ethical questions that we need to ask ourselves when you're building our algorithms and our models. And I've seen you guys have a really rich, the next 3 days where you're going to be really rich, and you're going to, really deep dive into some key areas on how to, do ML. You have to ask yourself, when you're building these models and technologies, are you creating ethical spaces? Or are you creating exclusionary spaces? So yeah, just, exclusion, communal, affordability, these are questions we always need to bring to the fore when you're building technology. So sometimes it's good to define what something is, and sometimes if you want to understand what something is, you have to realize what it is not, or rather, what are the consequences of not considering ethics in design or ethics by design. And I'm just going to allow us to watch this video for about 30 seconds. And so in HCI, because we look at how people use technology and we build technology in certain ways, there are ways you can build technology so that it can be more difficult for someone to enjoy using that tech. One of these ways is what we call dark patterns. I don't know if any of you has heard of dark patterns, but with this short clip, you'll be able to understand what dark patterns are. And interestingly, people can deliberately create dark patterns because they can give they have corporate benefits. When you make sure someone spends 5 minutes on your app instead of just 30 seconds, maybe it's because you want them to spend more time or buy more products. But is it really ethical to do that? So let me know if you can hear me. I know I shared my sound, but you know how tech doesn't work sometimes. If you can hear me, just thumbs up. If you can hear this video, rather.
Yes, we can hear it.
Dark patterns are features of interface design, crafted to trick users into doing things that they might not want to do, but which benefit the business in question. Here's an example. Have you ever tried to delete your Amazon account? Here's the Amazon homepage. What's the first thing you might think to do? The obvious place to look is the account dropdown here. Once you're in here, you look around, it's a lot of information, but if I'm interested in deleting my account, I think that your account is probably a good place to go. Once I'm on this page, there's a lot more information, payment options, login and security, and a bunch of stuff down here. Unfortunately, you could click every link on your account page, but none would deliver you to a place where you could actually delete it, because it's not here. In order to actually delete your Amazon account, you have to go all the way down to the bottom of the page, and under Let Us Help You, click Help. Once you're in here, you have to navigate to Need More Help because, putting it on this page would just be too easy. Then click Contact Us. This is where it starts to get ridiculous. It's still nowhere to be seen, but of the 4 options on the top that you want help with, click Prime or Something Else. You want the something else. In this Tell Us More About Your Issue dropdown, there's still nothing that suggests account deletion. You just have to know to click Login and Security. And then in a second dropdown, there it is. The magic button, Close My Account. Except in order to actually do that, you now have to have a chat conversation with an Amazon associate who's going to tell you all the reasons account deletion is a bad idea. See, you can't delete the account yourself. They have to do it for you. This is a dark pattern. a crappy user experience that intentionally makes it difficult, almost impossible without help, to do something that hurts Amazon. UX specialist Harry Brignall categorizes this specific kind of dark pattern as a roach motel, a design that makes it very easy for you to get into a situation, but very hard to get out. Brignall is actually the one who coined the term dark pattern in 2010, and he's been cataloging and lecturing about the issue ever since. Many of these dark patterns we're all familiar with. I only have to search my email for a few seconds to find one. For example, here, I'm getting spam emails from Architectural Digest. I scroll down and look at that. This is a mess, but it's a mess on purpose. The unsubscribe link is here, but it's devilishly hard to see. That's because it's the same font and virtually the same color as the rest of the fine print. Here's another dark pattern that uses color to misdirect. Over at the user testing blog, Jennifer Jerome points out that the mobile game Two Dots carries you through the experience by offering green buttons. A green button to start the game, a green button to pick a level, a green button to start the level, and 3 green buttons to continue to the next level, and so on. But once you lose a level, the color scheme changes. The first green button you see leads you right to an in-app purchase, while the continue button is just a little X that blends into the larger element. I wonder how many people clicked buy moves reflexively as a Pavlovian response. Now, to be fair, this is a pretty benign dark pattern, but it shows how companies can use something as simple as color to trick you into doing what they want. On the more egregious end of the spectrum, you have stuff like this banner ad for Chatmost, which is made to look like it has a speck of dust on it, causing people to brush it away and accidentally click the link. Or you have sites like Booking.com, where they do everything in their power to increase the urgency of a purchase, going so far as to alert you in big red notifications of the hotel rooms that you just missed. I mean, you better book now. You don't want to be left behind again, do you? Every once in a while, a company goes a little too far and actually breaks the law. Remember when you used to get spam with all those LinkedIn invites from friends? Well, that was because of a confusing dark pattern on their ad contacts page, which allowed LinkedIn to scoop up people's email contacts and send them messages repeatedly without their consent. In a comprehensive blog post, Dan Schlosser showed how LinkedIn tried to trick users 8 times in their sign-up and onboarding procedures into surrendering their email contacts. Unfortunately for LinkedIn, this proved to be a step too far. Users filed a legal challenge claiming that sending multiple unwarranted emails hurt their professional reputation. LinkedIn settled the dispute for $13 million, which came out in the end to about $10 per user. It's rare for dark patterns to face consequences like these. Mostly they stay just on the right side of the law, understanding that it's hard to legislate around the psychological tricks of UX design. Everything on the internet is fighting for your attention, but there's a difference between those who are taking the time to build trust and loyalty and the special offer you clicked which actually enrolled you in a monthly subscription, or the social network that dark patterned you into letting it sell data that you didn't even know it had. Some of the responsibility is on us, but some is on design too. And it's not the fault of the designers, they're just doing what they're tasked to do, knowing full well that if they don't, others will. As Brignall says, our best defense against the dark patterns is to be aware of them and shame the companies who utilize them. Design is what mediates our interaction with the internet. It's the language we...
So I'll just pause there. And I'll pause there because I wanted sort of to really think around what this means. So essentially, when we're creating technology and we're creating how people use technology, interact with technology, it's a deliberate act, right? You can deliberately support people or channel how people use tech by showing them after this page, you go to that page and you go to that page. If we're thinking around app design, for example. Now in that deliberation, us as experts, us as designers, us as UI designers, as UX designers, as ML engineers, you need to think around what are you doing? How are you guiding someone to use their technology and what is the effect of that? And when we don't have these conversations in tech, when we allow for bias to creep in, that's when we have technology that leads into very unfortunate scenarios where, like, I'm sure you guys heard of the fact that if you, ages ago, it's been fixed now, but if you Google Black woman, then part of the results include actual monkeys. That's why there are other very unfortunate scenarios where in particular cities in the States, the budget allocation for when we're thinking around where to allocate money to a particular place, unfortunately, the results would say this place is we should get less money because it's more unsafe. And when we dig deeper, when you look under the veil, all these decisions are around race. Yeah, so this area is less secure. And why? Because it has more people of a particular race or ethnicity. So when we're building these technologies, these decisions, these algorithms don't just happen on their own, right? It's us as experts who allow them to happen. So ethics needs to be a concern for us when we're building technology, because even with designers, as we've demonstrated here with the Amazon as an example, it's very deliberate to ensure that you don't close your account, because you want to have more users. You want to report that you have billions or millions of users. So you're deliberately making these decisions to make it more difficult for people to say leave your account. So what other things are we doing or might we accidentally do if we don't consider ethics from the start? So if there's one thing you listen to or take away from this conversation today, what might you be doing or not doing that will then lead into either a dark pattern or an algorithm that disenfranchises people or marginalizes people? That should be a daily question that you ask yourself. So I'm going to now just skip to this next slide here and figure out how to move this without. Yeah. So fortunately, there are at least responses that are trying to ensure that we have less and less of unethical design. For example, less and less dark patterns. So for example, this is an example from the States. California is banning companies from using dark patterns, which, as we all know by now, they're very sneaky website design decisions that make things like canceling a subscription frustratingly difficult. So legislation helps, but legislation is usually a response, right? It's usually reactive and not proactive. So it then means that the onus is really on us to ensure that we make proactive steps, not to ensure that, to prevent unethical design. This is another really hilarious example, and I'll just read it for you. So shortly after midnight, a resident of a small town in Southern California calls the police to report hearing a man inside a neighbor house screaming, "I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill you." Then officers arrived on the scene and ordered the screaming man to come out of the house. The man stepped outside wearing shorts and a polo shirt. The officers found no victim in the house. Instead, the man was yelling at his computer. So the reason for this is, and the reason I bring this out, is because now I'm talking about persuasive design. You see, computers have been created to, or rather, computers have now become our friends. You don't see your phone as this clunky gadget that you can just throw around the house. If anything, you probably even have a secret place where you keep your phone. It sleeps next to you and it's charging. We've personalized and we've personified the technology that we use, right? And by so doing, this allows technology to be used in certain ways. So if we look at this deliberate way, again, we deliberately create technology in a way that you can think of it as your best friend or a person, and through that we allow for other interactions to happen on, through your friend. So you'll spend more time with your friend on Instagram, you'll spend more time with your friend on Facebook, and this is done deliberately. So now what we call that persuasive design, or it falls under the sector of persuasive design. So there is good persuasive design and there's bad persuasive design. I'm only going to talk about probably 1 to 2 things here because of time, but happy to have a conversation later if it comes out in Q&A. So for example, if we look at this middle cartoon here, right? Stuff like gazing promotes likability. What do I mean by that? When you stare at someone for some time, instead of casting your eyes away all the time, you create familiarity by maintaining eye contact. And then this again can be used in how we design technology. So gestures and expressions, they promote persuasion more than just only using gestures. So that's why nowadays you see even some of the animations we use, as it's just beyond shaking your head. Now you're seeing hands and expressions coming into not only the 2D objects you use, but also in robots, right? So we're seeing more of these humanistic patterns being created in these very obtuse technologies. And it's deliberate because through having a friend who's a robot, you'll treat them much better than having a brick that's a robot, right? So you can think of it that way. Language, right? So even in some of the tools used nowadays, even when you switch off maybe an app, it says goodbye. It just doesn't go off abruptly, because again, language really influences how we relate with technology. So we can have good ways. We can use this. We can use these positive attributes like, gesture, expression, language, social roles to help you do better things with technology. But also, again, the dark side, we can be evil by design. I'm going to focus just on one example here. And these examples are based on the 7 deadly sins. I don't know if you guys know the 7 deadly sins, but they include like laziness, anger, envy, etc. So how you can design evil by design. This was used a lot by Apple users, if there are any in the house. You see that message that used to come at the end of every message sent from my iPhone? It's a very good way of making the people who don't have iPhones feel like they should have an iPhone. Yeah, the FOMO effect, which again is it's evil by design. So we're trying to ensure that you feel so bad that you don't have an iPhone that you go and buy an iPhone, right? So again, we can use envy to ensure that we benefit a corporate. But should we really be using envy? Ask yourselves that. Sloth. This is another very example here. So sometimes if next time you're trying to subscribe to something, the option that's highlighted for you will usually be the second. It will not be the cheapest option. It could be like the second most expensive, third most expensive. So the use of color here and buttons moving up and down, or even the word hot, sorry about that. Here we use the word hot and it's in red, so your eyes are attracted to it. And we want you to click on this, not because this is the best option for you, but because we're taking advantage of your laziness. So you're just gonna be directed to what your eyes directed to and click on it, but really it's not the best option for you, but it's the option that's gonna make me more money. That's how it's done. So should we really be designing in this way? There are guiding principles on how to ensure that we practice ethical design. I'm only going to talk about 2. So these are principles that you can even use when you're thinking around building cloud and AI technologies. So for example, this second one says, provide enough information for people to make informed decisions at every stage about whether, when, and how to use the product or service. Don't hide information, right? So someone should know that if I choose this option here, that says, it's $1,200 a month, it is actually more expensive than that $1,000 a month. What's the difference between the 2 of them? Is this one more beneficial to me, or is the 1,000 one actually better for me, right? So you're just trying to ensure that people make better decisions so that you're not trying to trick them into making the decision that only benefits you. I'll skip over this example here. Another thing which I love, and this point again for number 7, complement differing needs, abilities, viewpoints, and morals. So first, recognize them. Recognize that when you're building for people, we are different. We have different needs, abilities, perspectives, political inclinations and leanings, morals. First, recognize that your gamut of users will be quite different. Then understand them. That's why we like to do research, right? Before we build technology, you need to understand who you're building for. When you're generating your personas, you need to know this persona fits this and that persona fits that. Then complement those differences. In other words, don't create technology that divides people further, but create technology that actually helps people complement each other. And here I'd allow you to think around the Cambridge Analytica story, right? So Cambridge Analytica benefited from people's different viewpoints and abilities to ensure that they promote certain agenda. So again, that was unethical. So we can really ensure that we need not be unethical. Right, so I'm just going to end there because I want to have some time for questions, comments, or anything. Thank you very much for your time.
So once again, thank you, Dr. Kagonya. That's a wonderful presentation. And very important lessons probably that some of us, we didn't even know. How tech firms are even trying to get our attention, probably more than our family members. And I think it's a very wonderful presentation. I'll allow the participants to ask a question. I'm sure there's a lot of questions from the audience.
Perfect.
First question. Yes, Ariel, just come and ask.
Good afternoon. So, I'm Ariel Achiba. There's a book I read a while back by Shoshana Zuboff, I think, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism. And she talks about this need by companies to have adverts giving precise or very accurate predictions about products. That in a way making adverts almost 100% accurate, and that had a lot to do with data science, machine learning, and harvesting of the surplus of users online. And the fact that we're living in a very capitalistic society, I wonder if it's really practical to practice ethics in design, because in some ways we're driven by that impetus to maximize profits for these big firms like Microsoft, Google, Facebook, and Twitter. So is it really practical? Is it a dream, or is it a wish? On some part, some utopia somewhere to practice ethics. Yeah.
I think that's an excellent question. That's a very good question. So if we think around, and you hit the nail on the head, right? So when we're building technology solutions, and when we're building the experience of technology, because we are aware of how we can direct behavior through technology, it becomes quite easy to attend to maybe the corporate goals, right? So what I'm trying to say is, like in HCI is a combination of design, then now social sciences, and now computer engineering. So this social sciences part allows us to study stuff like anthropology, sociology, basically behavior. So now that we know how people behave, we can design how to make them behave, to put it simplistically. So is it possible to practice ethics by design and still meet the corporate goals? Yes, because one of the corporate goals is to be ethical, right? Can you still make money through ethical businesses? Yes, you can. And in fact, another benefit of legislation is that now the fines are so copious that you're encouraged to just be ethical anyway, right? Legislation has allowed for that decision. If it's just between making money, more money or less money, the unethical route can cost you much more than the ethical route. And another thing is that it's not just only about the monetary spend, it's also about the PR. Like how is your company going to be viewed as this hostile adversary who's just out there to fleece people and steal data from them? Or is your company going to be viewed as a friend who cares about benefiting the business or the individual? So while indeed you're right, it can be easier to be unethical and to to push people in a certain direction, doing good has more benefits than doing bad. And that's been proven time and time again. So doing good has had more benefit than being bad, because you're even becoming more inclusive. You're increasing the number of people who can use your products. You're allowing them to do much more with the products that you're creating. When you're thinking around collecting data, if you gone are the days of companies listening through your microphone or listening through your earphones and trying to steal your data anyway. Now there are better ways, simply asking for permission. This app is using this, and this, and this. Give permission, yes or no. You've seen now with at least in the Android environment, you're asked, do you want this app to use location all the time, or only to use location when it's being used, or never to use your location data? You give that clear permission. So you're involving the users in controlling or allowing you to use their data and making them more aware of using your data. And through this ethical means, it's actually more beneficial to both you and the company. So it becomes, so you can, make your wealth by still being ethical as a tech company. Yeah.
So thank you very much for the response to Ariel's questions and probably all of us. Any other question? Anyone with a question? So I can take this chance to also ask a question.
Hello?
Hi, Bon. First, you're breaking up. I didn't hear your question.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, so my question is, however much countries are coming up with these comprehensive policies against issues like dark pattern and so on. In your own experience and maybe in your experience, by how technically being able to be enforced in Europe, in UK, but still people go against them, and to some extent it's not covered or is not even able to catch up with them. Do you think they are technically feasible to enforce them to prevent issues like dark patterns?
Okay, if I got your question correct, so is it possible to detect dark patterns? Was that the question? I think it's breaking up a bit, but I'll just go with that because I think there's an internet interruption. So in response, there are always proactive and reactive measures, and if you're trying to encourage or enforce say ethical design. So the good thing is even using we can even use data science to try and help us to find out how a particular user journey, so we call it a user journey. So a user journey is when you're looking at technology in any tool that you use, let it be an app. So when you click on login, then you put in your email address, then you put in your password. So this is part of a journey, right, on how someone uses your technology. So we can then check how is this user journey. Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. So I'll give the example of how we use tools which we build into the backend of any system to ensure that we check that that user journey does not cause bottlenecks, right? So in the UX world, there are tools that we just put in the backend through a simple line of code. And what it now presents to us in the interface is places where people are getting stuck, where people fall off. So for example, if they'll get to the home page, but then when they want to buy a product, they have difficulty buying that product, right? So they keep on, we just see how people fall off from that user journey. So there are tools that can help us to check that, or even when you're building the actual page by page, ensure that this experience does not lead to a dark pattern. And how do we do that? We test. So we test and test and test and test. So again, even for ML engineers, the testing has to occur with different types of people. So what I'm trying to say is, say if you're building something for I don't know, people between the age of 18 to 45, there's no way that you're only going to test with males. There's no way you're only going to test with people who live in urban areas. There's no way you're only going to test with people within a certain socioeconomic group. You need to test across the board, so that when you're testing with each of these personas, you're trying to reduce bias against anyone, whether it's on the lines of gender, on the lines of race, on the lines of socioeconomic group. So first, there are tools that, to answer your question quickly, there are tools that can help you to check this. You put them in the back end, and you're able to get this data presented in a certain way that can make you make better decisions. Thirdly, when you're creating, whether it's an algorithm, a model, a user interface design, you need to test widely with people who don't look like you, or people who don't come from the same place you come from. So that's how we're going to ensure that we have more ethical systems, than previously before. But that's also a very good question.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much once again, Dr. Kagonya. Any other question?
I think I have time for one more question.
Just come close. So there's a question for you, Dr. Kagonya, again.
Okay, my name is Dennis. Sometimes I have a problem, I need a solution, but then I can't access this kind of data for my solution. So there are some companies that they sell data, some provide for free, but then how can you merge this, providing open data and again keeping the privacy of the people? So how can you achieve such kind of balance between privacy and keeping the data open?
That's a good question. And I think someone will probably answer more of that. But the parts that I'm going to speak on, number one, ensuring that your data is clean, right? So be careful around everyone. There's so many, there are particular people who claim it's open data, but it does not follow any open data policies, right? So you need to ensure, like, for example, is your data anonymized? You need to ensure, like, what data are you collecting? Is it very easy to triangulate some data points? It's anonymized, but if you do certain triangulation, you can figure out who that person is or who that set of user is. That's not good data. So make sure you work only with clean data. So be very careful about your sources. Now, I think the conflict that can come here is what you've mentioned. This one is free. This one is not free, right? And let's assume that you have limited resources. So then how are you going to ensure that you can get still good data if it's going to cost you a bit of a buck? I think maybe check good sources, look for innovative ways even to collect fresh data, depending on what data you're looking at. Is it that you could then work with existing organizations that can collect this data for you in ways that are ethical? Or can you collect it yourself, through people you know and people who know that people that they know and all that? So then you ensure that you follow the procedures collecting data. You've asked for consent, you've been able to demonstrate what the data is going to be used for, you've allowed the people you're collecting data from to always check the outputs or the deliverables that come from that data. So you can choose options where you collect it yourself. It may take more time than money, or ensuring that the organizations that you work with, that they pick the data from, actually it is clean data. So do your own due diligence. Don't always just trust that data is clean. And lastly, I guess then you can also now seek for opportunities where you can get funding to actually access that data or get that data. You also asked around the whole thing of privacy. So there's always that thing of, if you collect the data, because I would assume you'll be more stringent, trying to ensure that you've first of all, you need to know, you need to be more aware of what constitutes privacy. So how can you ensure that this data will promote privacy? So again, it's about doing your homework, right? Then now, as you're collecting data through these processes and through these tools that you're using, you can then decide whether you want to share the data or not, right? Because then we start these questions on who owns the data. Data ownership is quite an active conversation, and I hope that we'll be able to have, we'll probably have more time to do that question. But then you can decide if you as Dennis, you connected it with maybe you and your colleagues, then do you own that data? Will you share that data? But at the end of the day, I think it's just being more aware of what constitutes clean data, ensuring that you work with sources that, even if they're free, you still do a bit of background checking, and then also being very much attuned with rules like GDPR, which help us to understand how to even collect data, where to store the data, for how long. In Kenya, we are mimicking the GDPR in terms of that's what we are building our data sort of privacy laws around. So then it just becomes easier to understand how GDPR works, because we're going to enforce it or use those same laws anyway. So a bit of homework is required on us. That's why it's an ethical concern. It's a responsibility for each of us to be ethical. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Dr. Kagonya. Any other question? So I think
Thank
we
you for
don't have. Okay, thank you very much.
very good questions, guys. So yeah, great cohort.
Thank you so much, Ronnie. Really appreciate taking part. That was an absolutely fascinating talk. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much.
Once again, thank you, Dr. Kagonya. Back to you, Lindsay.
Okay, guys. Hope you really enjoyed that. I thought that was so interesting. It's time for a tea break at your end, and then Sam from Mary will be talking to you all. So if you want to go and take a tea break, and please do make sure that you're back by 3:30.
Hi, Lindsay. Are you able to see my screen?
First, yeah, can see it, and I can hear you, and yeah, everything looks good.
Okay, thank you.
You feeling okay? Things going all right?
Yeah, everything's going on. We're just having a break, and then we should be back in the next 17 minutes.
Great. All right, see you soon.
Thank you. Your price has gone up. Your price has gone up. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's done. Oh, it's done. You know, you want to do data science without doing maths. You want to do data science without doing maths.
No, you will notice me already with the guy. Actually, I have a slide on that.
Yeah, it has been a very huge discussion. People want to do data science without maths. Yeah.
I'm very Q&A because there's a slide I have. It's a challenge. It's a challenge to do that right now. Yeah. Last month I was beginning to talk about yes, like a workshop. And the challenge was the way computer science is taught. So applications and all, coding and system design and all, less than the same. I mean, you'll see that it's one of the.
Okay, hi everyone. We are about to start off. I hope you're okay with the tea. Who wasn't taking tea? Who wasn't taking tea? Yeah, okay, welcome. We're going to have, I'm getting noticed. We're going to have Roger who will introduce Dr. Maina. Dr. Maina will talk to you about data science landscape.
Sorry, the slides. To move the slides, I can do that. So.
Oh, hello everybody. So, Dr. Maina works also at Mari. So, Mari are working on some very interesting problems because what they're doing is that they're trying to find solutions in cloud technologies, in machine learning, and across technology to help solve problems that are African in nature. Yeah? So they're really working on very new ideas. It's a fairly new company. They started in December. Right now they're maybe 6 months old. They are a fairly small team, but they are working on very good, very new ideas and very new solutions that are very specific to the African context. Dr. Maina himself has worked in many other places before. He has worked in machine learning for a long time. He is a mathematician by profession and passion. And he has a wealth of knowledge about the landscape in the continent and about where we are at and where we are headed and what things we need to take into consideration. So without further ado, I will welcome Dr. Maina.
Thank you so much. And it's an honor to be here with all of you. I decided now that I'm in Nairobi, I may as well show up and be here in person so that at least when it's possible, it's always good to meet, but COVID has taught us that this may not always be the case. And so under today's circumstances, I was able to come. And so I hope to be able to take us through what I would call the ML landscape in Africa or machine learning landscape in Africa, data science. And I'll try to spend my time and walk you through my thoughts. I have a number of slides, and I was glad I was here early enough so that at least I could listen to Professor Anna's presentation. Because even as I talk about data science and the landscape in Africa, it's always good to start from the data science itself and then from there move to the landscape in Africa. And when I talk about the landscape in Africa, I'll also talk a little bit about what it is that we do at Mari. Dr. Kagonya talked about that a little bit, and I'll get back to it because I'll try to use that in some of what we're calling the pillars to highlight some of the things that we're doing. Okay, so yeah, that's my name. He's mentioned by training I'm a mathematician. Actually, I studied in mathematical finance. and then I defected to machine learning, artificial intelligence world, and here we are. Good. So the outline is as follows. I'll just introduce data science, and because Professor Anna talked a little bit about that, I won't spend a lot of time on it, and then I'll move on to data science, specifically at Murray, what it is that we're doing, and I'll also highlight a few things about some of the skill sets that are important to have, all right? And I'm saying this based on the, I hope I'm loud enough for the ones at the back, based on some experiences over the last 5 years in terms of watching people coming for interviews in the companies I've been working in, some of the things that are, people look into or care about when it comes to an interviewing setup. And for me, there's one critical slide that I have here that some of the mistakes that people make, I will highlight that. To me, I felt that's quite critical to mention. And then I'll have a few, a slide on the landscape in AI, ML, AI, data science in Africa, and I think that will conclude this session. So I'll start with this slide and I won't say anything about it. All right. And we'll come back to that later because of the guy at the very bottom. For those who like coding, you can see what he's carrying from the fire. Right, what is it? Huh? Python, perfect, good. All right, so data science. Around 20, I think this thing was coined by guys from Facebook and LinkedIn, I'm not exactly sure, but the term data science itself. But it was actually categorized as a sexist job of the 21st century, and this was way back in 2012. And below, we still see that as late as November last year, data science is still a top job. Being a data scientist is still a top job. And why is that the case? Why is that? Why has the profession sustained about 10 years of high demand, right? It's all about the high qualities that are required and the high demand for the skills, right? And the idea is that as a data scientist, you take in what you call unstructured data. And the idea is that you need to find meaning, order, and value for a company, right? So most of the data, think of it in terms of the charts that you find online, like I bet all of you use WhatsApp. And the rule is that they don't read your data, but they provide a platform. But it's some platforms where you're interacting with the company itself. They have the right to be able to sort of try to get into the charts and be able to make sense of that. And it's in that way that they're able to design the products for the specific people, right? And so the data scientists in those organizations, what they do is they take all that data in unstructured form, tries to make sense of it. And then from there, the question that the company asks is, how can we create value out of this? How can we make money out of this, right? And so what as a data scientist, one is supposed to do is that you need to provide insights and to your company to be able to provide competitive advantage, all right? And that's why you look at the big giants from big tech companies, right? The likes of Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft, Google, IBM, it's all about trying to, even at one point, trying to make money, or to, the word is what? That's a technical phrase and I'm trying to remember. It's just to make money from the data, right? And that's why they say the data is the new oil, right? Because all this data, all these unstructured data, the simple things you do online, they point towards, or they lead towards contributing to the algorithms that these companies use for marketing purposes, product development, and stuff like that. I think towards the end, I will maybe, if time allows, I'll show a slide that something we did some years back. And so there is a need for specialists and generalists. So specialist people just focusing on one specific area, that's all they do. But we also need data scientists who also get the bigger picture, who understand what is really happening, all right? And this is now from a company-wide perspective. But we also have people, this is the only thing they look at, who is buying a specific product. And then they're able to take advantage of that information and design products for that. And so data science will remain for the foreseeable future as a profession and as a field that is in high demand. The good thing is you're here, that tells me you're interested in data science, and so I'm preaching to the choir, as they say, right? Good. I won't go through these slides, but I think if they be shared later, you can actually see. There's still a shortage as of 2020 in AI, big data, because it gets bigger. So like, if you look at this very last bottom here, there's been a 74% increment in hiring for data scientists, all right? And it's not going to abate. The demand is not going to abate. And the beauty is, I believe in Africa, we are just taking off, right? Companies and even governments are starting to appreciate the need for data scientists. And so we may be behind the curve as compared to other nations in what we call the global north, but at least we are still not left out totally like the continent was left in the past revolutions. We are still somewhere, and therefore the skills are going to continue being in demand. And so it's important for us to ask ourselves, how do we position ourselves so that we take advantage of this wave, of this challenge and the opportunities that will come with it, all right? And so in the interest of time, I won't really spend much time on that slide, and so I'll move to this. Professor Anna talked about this, and the idea is that the data science is sort of this little bubble in here in the middle that intersects computer science, mathematics, and statistics, and the domain knowledge. And by domain knowledge, we know that all these technologies are not applied in isolation. It's not a technology just for the sake of it. The moment you hear of a neural network, it's not just an algorithm as a net to itself. It has an application in a specific area. So it could be in healthcare, it could be in finance, it could be in education, it could be in agriculture, it could be in any field, literally. And that's why when it comes to the domain knowledge component, any field that you know of, including linguistics, has demand for data scientists. And that's how it's going to be going forward. And a while back, I was having a conversation with someone and we were thinking, in years to come, right now we leave programming to be a domain for computer scientists, right? But then we were like, wait a minute, it's called a programming language. And there's a possibility in years to come, whichever profession you're in, you may be required to have some knowledge of some coding skills. It may be just like the way any language, English for communication, because programming really is just a way of you being able to speak to the machine, computer, right? And so it may become critical that all of us in the future may be required, maybe not you, maybe the generation after you and your kids and our kids, right? It may be sort of a prerequisite, just like the way you speak English, that can you be able to do some basic coding, right? And so this is in all professions, including healthcare, including law. Engineering, fine, you consider it sciences, so by default, we are supposed to be there. But this is going to be in every field. And so this specific area here, the domain knowledge, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be a master. So for you to apply these algorithms, it doesn't necessarily mean you need to know everything about medicine, right? It's just the ability to be able to pick a few things for you to be able to communicate with an expert in the field to be able to design the algorithm better. And why that is important is because you may have the same algorithm, and like I said, it's just like mathematics, right? It's agnostic to the field. You can apply it in any area. But for you to be able to know, if you've done a bit of mathematics, you realize that the assumptions that you make before you have any theorem, right? Right? You make some assumptions, right? And for you to be able to apply these data science or machine learning algorithms, there are a few things and an understanding of the domain itself that may be useful. Not being an expert in healthcare, not being an expert in finance, but just being able to pick a few things in it and know, as you develop your algorithm, some things that work in another domain may not work in healthcare, may not work in finance, for example, all right? And so this is the one thing. And like you've noticed, I'm not focusing so much on, because Professor Anna talked about this, right? But when it comes to computational skills, all we really need, or what we have, we talk about programming and all, but really eventually all we want to do is to be able to have the skills to collect and prepare the data, right? And in this case, creativity is needed, all right? Creativity is needed, because if someone throws a data dump on you, it's a question of, okay, how do you even get to make sense of it, right? So it comes to, from the computational side of it, it's, you need to be able to have some creativity in it to be able to ask yourself, how do I break this down, how do I break down this data set for it to be useful for a specific task? Okay, later I'll talk about a bit about the whole data pipeline, just for completeness, right? Now, then we come to this other interesting area, maths and statistics, right? We need to be particular about the choice of the model that we use, because there are lots of even AI models that are there, right? And the beauty is, and this is where the math bit comes in, the underlying principle, underlying foundational principle to all these machine learning AI models is mathematics, all right? And so I'll come back to this a little bit later, maybe in 2 slides down the line, and talk about that. And so why this comes into play is we need these algorithms to help us solve some problems that traditional, let me call them traditional tools and algorithms are either slow or inefficient. There's some insights that if you try to work with the classical statistical tools, you may never be able to identify, or it may take forever. But the beauty is now we have what you call a computational power. For those who follow technology, you know the Moore's law thing, yeah? The power of how the chip itself, the processor, how that has evolved. We're even thinking with the plateauing, and questions are like, what's next, right? But at least because of the computational power we have, some of the problems that are taking forever, we can be able to solve them fast. And I think Professor Anna mentioned, this is not a new field. These algorithms have been there, but now there's the convergence of the problems are there, and we have the tools there based on the computational power, okay? And so that's one thing that is really coming together nicely in our generation, that we are able to take advantage of the tools that are coming. Of course, there are even faster machines that are being developed, quantum computers and all. They're being developed, and they will have their own paradigm for operation. But the beauty is the mathematical foundation for enough of these tools remain the same, okay? And so this is why data science is becoming quite critical, and I need to be worried of time here. Okay, so the pipeline, I'll be brief on this. Project planning, preparation, modeling, and follow-up. And I'll talk about the modeling bit and the follow-up component because it's one of the things that sometimes we forget, right? The moment you create your own model and you run data through it, for those who've experimented a bit with any machine learning tool or machine learning model, is that you realize that you have to sort of keep retraining your model, right? So in the other world, we talk of the model recalibration. You need to keep adjusting and recalibrating your model, right? That's how we used to talk in the other mathematical modeling world. You need to recalibrate your model constantly. And so you need to create a model, do validation, evaluation, and calibration again and again. And even when you present to the client, eventually, which is the last component, is you may need to do some refinement because the ideas that you had initially, rarely do you ever develop a product. And I'm talking of it in a very general sense, not in this case, you're working for a group like Microsoft that we have maybe some specific client targets, right? You could be in your startup, right? And you have this client who wants to be able to understand the market segment, right? So that they can be able to develop a new product. Rarely do you design a product, you take it to the client and it's like, perfect. Enough times you have to have that back and forth, okay? That back and forth in terms of, yes, we're able to get these results, but we need to do better. And so it's quite important to realize that we have to be ready to do model refinement. And why that I'm emphasizing on this is because of one key component that is required as a data scientist, being able to communicate your results. The challenge enough times with most of our scientists is that we can do all the work, but we can't explain sometimes to a client. You can't sell anyone a spoon and they need to eat. You get. So the aspect of also how holding our communication skills a little bit, that's quite important because if you're dealing with a client, they need to understand what it is that you've done. You need to be able to have that conversation with them. Once you're able to have that conversation with them, then you can be able to improve your model, okay? And so I'm talking of this in a very general way so that at least we're not looking at this in terms of being employed by the government or being employed by Google, IBM, Microsoft, you know. You could also be in a startup setting where you're actually almost a jack of all trade, right? And so I'm trying to keep this as general as possible in as much as in a few seconds I'll go to a very specific one. There are several roles that exist within data science, from an engineer, big data science specialist, and those ones are close to what Professor Anna talked of the unicorn, but really it's down here, the full stack data scientist. And you see, depending on your skill set, there are different roles you can play within the data science field, okay? Actually, I think there's one I left out for an entrepreneur. I mean, if you're in a startup, you really have to think of selling your product you get. And it requires being able to understand what's happening in all these various small components. And so I'm trying to keep it in such a way that even if you decide you don't want to be this guy who is here as an engineer, machine learning engineer, data science engineer. You don't want to be this big data specialist or a researcher like some of us, right? You can still play a role because all you need is a good understanding of the model, a good understanding of the market segment that you want to get a foothold into. And then from there, being able to see how do I plug in with my skills? Because we all have different sets of skills. And I think the biggest challenge sometimes is we try to force people like me to market things and I can't. I mean, I can't convince you to buy anything. Right? I tried that at one point when I was a student somewhere doing PhD in Australia. I tried, I couldn't. Right? So it's important also to knowing yourself, know your strength, your skills. What are you good at? Okay. And so we have this guy who this would be the perfect for all of us, full stack data scientist. But yeah, it's a rare thing. And that's why in most organizations, you end up having people, they're hired, but then these, so you're good in computing, you're good in math, but then they end up having to hire someone who is a specialist in a specific domain. So for example, if you think of, let me think of an organization that does work in healthcare, in AI, they end up having a specialist who is in healthcare. I'm a former colleague I used to work with. I joined Mari at IBM. He had a PhD in biomedical engineering. He was a pharmacist, really. And so whenever we were dealing with a problem that is healthcare related, we had to pull him in. Because to understand the domain itself requires, sometimes you have to be partnered with someone. And that happens in a big organization. But in a small organization, we have to pick up the skill ourselves. We have to learn the minimum that we need to be able to make some headways. So at Mari, what do we do? Kagonya mentioned a few things about us. And so I'll just focus on these 3 pillars. So we are looking at what we're calling the future of work. So what I've done so far is I've talked about data science in general. Oh gosh, 8 minutes. So now let me talk about what we do at Mari. So we are looking at the future of work. And in this, in a nutshell, we're asking the question is, how does the future of work look like? I know I've used the same word to explain it, but in other words, when it comes to working, or the whole aspect of getting a business done in the office, how is that going to change? A simple example is learning. Now, we have people on the presentation, they're not physically here with us, right? And it's the same thing in the field. So this is in education. We talk about this being in education, right? But COVID has impacted even the way we work, right? Until I've not been to the office, physical office, since last year, March, okay? And I'm working, okay? So you see, the work going forward is going to be different from what it has been in the past 9 to 5 thing, right? COVID has impacted, actually accelerated the move towards the future of work. And one of the projects that is going on, and I think I'm going to mention this, is looking at the digital transformation in the SMB world, and specifically we're looking at the impact of COVID in that. And so the question we are trying to ask there is, how can AI plug in to facilitate productivity going forward, okay? The next pillar is healthcare. And in this particular case, so we've not started on this. So we've started on this first component, and then we'll gradually expand to these other facets. So the next one we'll be looking at how can we use AI, and maybe using a mobile technology to extend the reach. So basically penetration, the quality. And so this is in this particular case, think of it this way. And this is just a hypothetical example. We have a shortage of medical professionals in the country. So for those who are raised outside Nairobi, maybe in places that you have a clinic, right, that maybe has a clinic officer, not a doctor, some of the things they encounter may be beyond their skill set. So what would happen if, and it's already happening, if there is sort of a platform where they upload maybe some of the diagnostic things like x-rays and scans and all, and then someone, a specialist in K&H, is able to give feedback. And then they use that to make a prescription to the doctor. That's using technology to be able to extend the reach of healthcare. Effectiveness of the healthcare intervention, and this is in terms of the way you can be able to keep your, what do you call this? There's a word people use for the vitals, right? And somewhere in a hospital far away can actually keep track of that. How do we use AI to do that? And the one I really like is this last one in society, and I'll spend some time in maybe I'll jump to that in the interest of time, is in the society, right? In society, we're looking at financial inclusion, we're looking at agriculture, water, food security, and stuff like that. How do we use AI to be able to do that? I want to dash to that, but before I go there, let me talk about these knowledge, skills, and abilities that are required to make a good data scientist. And I'm talking of this now from our perspective at Mari. From the last 3 months, we've had some recruiting going on. So we look at what we're calling technical excellence. These are the technical skills that as a data scientist, it's good to have. And then we have what I'm calling general competencies. The thing is, I know if I talk about the technical excellence, we all have an idea of what we're talking about here. I mean, math, data mining skills, data exploration, data analysis skills. There's a bit I've put at the bottom here, research, because being a research institute, yes, unless you're being hired as a software engineer, but if you're being hired as a data scientist engineer or a data science, definitely an inclination towards research is important. And so it's not that we require that you must have published your work, but at least the ability to do research. You'll also be able to work with researchers, people like me, people like Kagonya and some others, right? So the ability to make sense of problems, understanding problems in a scientific mindset, that's sort of required. But interesting enough is this thing on the right that sometimes we ignore a lot, right? And I'll sum it all up I've talked about being able to adapt, because rarely do you find problems that are similar, are the same in essence. You may be dealing with the same, let's talk a bit of financial inclusion, a credit problem, right? But the same way you're able to apply this in a different context. And by different context, I mean like if you use in a banking setting. It's the same credit scoring problem, but you translate it now to using the mobile money. The algorithm doesn't work. It fails, right? So you need to be someone who is adaptive and also someone who adapts to new challenges and new problems every day, right? Collaboration, being able to work with others, drive for results, judgment, communication skills, I talked about it. And there's this guy here at the very bottom called the growth mindset, or the ability to learn. So like I mentioned earlier, we require there was that domain area that you may not be an expert in, but the ability to learn quickly. I mean, right now, there's a whole move towards, I think most people use Python in most of their machine learning work and R, right? But 5 years down the line, that will not be the case. Are you someone who can actually learn something new quickly? All right? Are you someone who can learn new technologies quickly? Are you someone who is always seeking to improve yourself constantly? And that comes out very easily in interviews, by the way. It comes out very easily. That mindset to learn, that mindset to make yourself a better version of you than you were yesterday, right? So that's what I talk about there. I know you're going to have this tomorrow, but I can't emphasize enough. I'm a mathematician, so I'm a bit biased here. Okay. Mathematical foundations are core. There are some skills that will make your life much easier when you're journey to be a data scientist. Yeah, these are math skills, right? And you look at it, they are quite basic when you think about it. From the math, I don't know if there's someone from a math background here, totally, right? I don't know, is there someone in the audience? Maybe not. Perfect. Right? Pure maths, applied maths, statistics. Right. Enough of the things that you've done, really will you use all of them here? But yet you realize the skills that are needed here are not very exhaustive in the sense of they're not too many. It's not a very complex of mathematics. Okay. And so these are some of the things that I feel it's important. And I'm talking this as a mathematician, preaching on behalf of mathematicians all over, that pick some skills in math, okay? This surprised me a few weeks back when we were interviewing, okay? That actually you can have someone showing up for an interview late, and it's an online interview, not a physical one, right? Some simple mistakes, right? Unpreparedness, not being ready for the interview, right? You don't even know finer details of the position you're interviewing for. Something very basic, right? You may be like, how can that be, right? But yeah, okay. Unaware of the data science process. So this is like not understanding the entire data pipeline. or data science pipeline itself, and yet it's a role for a data scientist, right? And then, of course, these technical deficiencies like horrible code, not well documented, giving responses too quickly. You don't even wait for maybe part of it. You're confident you're good. Don't even let the interviewer finish the question. You've actually started answering. And sometimes it's all about you're given a scenario, right? You're given a scenario, and then from there you sort of asked to provide like some thoughts on how you go about solving this, right? And instead of waiting for all the details, you're in trying to respond, right? Take your time to understand. Take your time to understand the problem itself. And it's a principle in life. If you want to solve a problem, make sure you understand it well. Ask questions, right? Interact with the person giving you the task. Try to understand what is it that they really mean. And finally, don't be afraid to say you don't know. It gets to a point even after asking for hints and all, you still don't get it. Don't lie. Don't try to. Yeah. I know sometimes you're told to fake it until you make it, but sometimes it throws you into a pit that you can't come out of. Okay. And so these are some of the things that I feel some of the mistakes that people make. I think my time is up. Oh, okay. I'm being told to continue. Looking at the potential impact of AI. So this is from a global perspective, and then I focus on Africa. I'll try to keep it in 5-7 minutes max, right? But what's really happening is that the impact on AI, again, keep in mind AI is sort of a subset of machine learning, which is really a subset of data science, right? Remember those circles that people, I think you've seen them before. Anyway, and so the impact of AI on the GDP, global GDP is estimated to be about $15 trillion by the year 2030. All right. And the challenge is, and this is a third component, is that this AI itself, as nice as it is, it may end up aggravating or widening the gap that exists between developed countries and less developed countries. All right. And sadly, it may end up reinforcing what you call the digital divide between the wealthy countries, the global north, and the rest of us in the global south. And so this brings in a challenge for us. And also an opportunity. I've always believed in every challenge there's an opportunity, right? And I'm glad we are all here, even those who are online, to be able to take advantage of this because we are equipping ourselves with the necessary tools, right? Where we find greatest potential in terms of impact of AI in Africa is in fields that are called agriculture, healthcare, financial sector, public sector, education, and work. This is almost everything, right? But I'm going to highlight on two, what I'm calling agriculture and financial sector. But before I get into that, I feel it's important to mention some of the challenges we have implementing AI in Africa is availability of data, right? And the quality of data. So Dr. Kagonya highlighted on that. And the challenge is we end up having sparse, what you call sparse data, or less data, right? And one of the ways we get around that is actually synthetic data generation. Sometimes there are also restrictions in terms of, in fields like healthcare, there are privacy issues like Dr. Kagonya mentioned, all right? Yet you want to be able to train your algorithm on that. So you don't have a lot of data points. What do? In maths, we used to record simulation. So in essence is, you ask yourself this question, this is the data that I have, but it's not enough to train an algorithm. And I'm going to hope that it's representative of the entire population. I'm going to hope that, right? And you can see the shortcoming of machine learning models already. So what normally happens is that you can actually generate synthetic data based on the distribution of the original data, all right? And then you have enough data points to be able to train your model. So in finance, what we used to do is, I used to work in finance, so for pricing, like stock market and all. So what you used to do is use Monte Carlo simulation, and then from there, it's sort of random. You learn the distribution, it's normal distribution, it's chi-square, it's whatever it is. And then from there, you use a specific model to generate enough data points. I think enough of you must have dealt with random number generation. You've heard of it somewhere, right? So this is kind of similar, but now you use different machine learning tools. So GANs and VAEs, and there's a paper here we did at the bottom, but this was working in a Western setting. We were calling it preservation of anomalous subgroups on machine learning transform data. And so what you are doing is the restriction in terms of, and I think I'll stop with this example in the interest of time. I will try to figure out how we can be able to, maybe I can show up one of these days and maybe finish up this. But the idea is that if you think of it as a bank, right? A bank, when you go in as a client, okay, you have your corporate bank in this particular case. They have your details, right? But you see, there are restrictions in some countries. Only people in a specific department can work with your data. So there are lots of regulations, like in Europe, you have the GDPR, in America. There are several, I think in California has its own laws. And so the question is, if you want to be able to, understand more about the specific behavior or the specific attributes of these individuals, yet you can't use the data because you're from a research department and this is another department, what do? You just learn the distribution, in quotes, of the client base that you have. And keep in mind, you're dealing with categorical data. You're looking at people's age, education, salaries, family status, gender, you get all those. So what we did in this particular case was, we learned the distribution. And then from there, second component is, the reason why you're getting this data is so that you can be able to design specific tools. So for example, for guys maybe over 25 to 32, maybe they're interested in some specific products, right? People maybe between 18 and 23, specific products, right? So you want to be able to design specific products targeted to these individuals, okay? But no, you can't use original data for that. So what do? You learn the distribution from the original data. Then from there, you identify those subgroups. And so what we did with this particular paper is, we identified the subgroups in the original data, then use a VAE to generate synthetic data for a totally new data set. So these are machine learning tools, right? And then from there, the last thing we wanted to ask ourselves, can we be able to identify similar groups in the new data set? We got about 50%, which is not the best, but it's good enough. It tells you at least you can be able to preserve what you call subgroups. So we preserve the subgroups. But then again, we also wanted to ask the question, can you be able to re-identify the original people? Because you're not supposed to. At least on that one, you were successful. So this paper is somewhere on this archive, you can find it online. So on this, whatever you share it. Okay? So that's sort of, we could say it's an application within financial sector. And in Africa, in Kenya, we may say it's not very relevant. We have more pressing challenges, right? And I think in another setting, I would have spent a little bit more time on that. All that to say is that the problems or the challenges we face in Africa, they're there. They're enormous. But the beauty is we have the tools, right? And so it's just for us to be able to equip ourselves with those tools, make ourselves as good as we can about that, and be ready to make a contribution and an impact to that. Like I've said before, these are careers in demand. These are fields that, in terms of job prospects, it will continue going on, right? And so it's all about desiring and aspiring to be the very best. Make yourself the better version of yourself than you were yesterday. Learn something new every day, right? And yeah, once you do that, the last thing is, there's a lot of data by the way in Kenya. I was surprised, I was talking to someone earlier today, a few minutes ago. Kenya National Bureau of Statistics has data. Yeah, and it's free. You can practice, you can test your algorithms and models. Get data from there. You may need to do a few data cleaning, transforming it, but data is there. All right, good, I have to stop there.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Sam.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for this very informative talk. And I'm sure, based on what we've heard today, there's a bunch of questions that are going to be coming up. So if you have a question, anybody with a question?
Dr. Maina is physically here now. You can ask questions. Yes, please. Okay. Welcome. You can
Okay, thank you for the presentation. I was saying, like in Microsoft, Africa Research Institute. We are working with the 3 domains: healthcare, project in the future, and then when it comes to agriculture, we have like specific research you are doing in agriculture in Africa or in Kenya?
Thank you for that question. So at the moment, we've not started yet, but one of the slides that I've left is some of the application of AI in agriculture. So for example, there's some work, there's a lady who's joining us, I think in the next 1 month or so. One of the things she did was using AI, basically image processing, to be able to understand and be able to diagnose animal disease, not animal, plant diseases by looking at the images on their leaves. And so that's one application. So it's just using images. You can tell a healthy leaf and a bad leaf, or a sick leaf, right? And then from there, using that as an early detection for intervention purposes. So we've not started anything yet on agriculture, but it's something we're hoping to roll in the next 2 years or so.
I know Jeff is interested because
he's
going to forecasting models.
All right. Okay.
Any other questions, please? Yes, Ari. Don't ask people.
You mentioned this thing about what is disparity, this digital divide. I was wondering if, also you mentioned the future of work.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering what are the implications of AI, because there's so much that can be reduced that might get and say traditional job description, like someone is an engineer, but now without that info and all that AI capability, but I feel like it might be the point where it's maybe widens the gap even within countries, like what's distribution between classes. So is that a genuine concern, or is there a way that at least you have to circumvent that? That's the matter.
All right, that's a hard question. So his question is looking at how AI and so I sort of picked it from twofold, right? The aspect of the disparity in terms of wealth, and also the almost like the joblessness that will come up because of technology. I will start by the first one, the one that is easier to address, the one for the divide, right? And the reason why that one is there is because there's infrastructure in developed countries, right? The countries that sort of, we could say they're slightly ahead, not slightly, some are quite far ahead of where we are right now, is because they've invested in the technical infrastructure that allows them to be able to, progress and make these innovations. And that's not just in terms of the infrastructure, even in terms of the education sector, right? And the training, the skill set. So that one is there. And sadly for us, we've been left a bit behind, but we can still be able to skip a number of steps that they went through to get there. Right? And this comes in because of mobile technology. It's really made life much, much easier. However, it doesn't negate the importance of investing in the infrastructure itself, the likes of like fiber optics in Kenya. Let me use that example. And it's one of the things that has really helped Kenya to remain at least slightly ahead of enough of our competitors in Africa, or at least I would say other countries in Africa. Sadly, yes, some jobs will be affected, right? But again, I'll use the analogy that came up, or that was used when computers were being introduced in the country, because those used to work with typewriters used to say, our jobs are going to go. And some of them were really trying to sabotage this whole computer thingy. But the reality is, it's inevitable. So the solution actually is just to adapt, right? Adapt. And so in as much as some jobs will go, it will create new jobs or new opportunities. That's how I look at it, right? Some jobs may go, yes, but some new jobs will be created because of the technology. And so it's just a question of pivoting oneself and adapting oneself. I know I've not exhaustively answered your question about the capital, the wealth disparity. Again, I think that one is being linked up with the digital divide. So if we don't catch up, yeah, it's going to increase, sadly.
Thank you very much, Dr. In the interest of time, we have to stop there, but Dr. will hang around for a few minutes, so you can talk to him, ask him a question in person as we continue. So thank you very much, Chantal. Once again, let's clap.
So back to you, Lindsay. Sorry for the time, but we had to handle some of the questions.
Thanks, Boniface. We have Daniel with us now waiting. Daniel, I'm so sorry we kept you waiting for so long. Are you able to see if you can share your screen?
Hi, Lindsay. I am here. I don't know if you guys can hear me over there.
Yes, yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
All right. I can see my very good friend Boniface already. Yeah, so let me try. I don't know if my time is up, so I can try sharing my screen.
So as Daniel shares his screen, so Daniel's got over 10 years experience in software engineering, and he was the lead technical coordinator for Andela in Lagos, Nigeria, before joining University of Satellite to study satellite technology. Currently, he's the lead machine learning engineer for Social Solutions Network Company in Delaware, United States, and previously he was a data science fellow with a project on Kaduna State, Nigeria, co-funded by Melinda and Bill Gates Foundation. So he has got a wealth of knowledge with regards to application of data science, especially in the area of health. So allow me to welcome Daniel Ayuba La. Daniel.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Boniface Osoro. I am very, very happy to be here. Once again, mic check. I don't know if you can hear me, just put a wave.
Yeah, we can hear you, Daniel.
All right, thank you very much. So, my good people in Kenya, I bring you warm greetings from Nigeria. I hope you have clear weather there. The weather here in Nigeria is a bit cloudy and rainy, but it's a good time to communicate and relate with you guys. So formally, I will start with some bit of introduction, even though Boniface have done a lot. Yeah, currently, once again, I'm Daniel L. Ayuba, and I'm from Nigeria. Currently, I lead a team of AI and ML engineers in a startup company in US. I used to be a software engineer, Boniface mentioned that, but I transitioned to data science. I have my first degree in computer science in Nigeria, and then my second degree in satellite applications with data science. Probably you'll begin to have an idea where I met my good friend Boniface. We were classmates in the UK. So one fun fact about me, I spent my teenage years as a rap artist. Although my wife used to say I have a cranky voice, so please don't ask me to rap for you. So I added my picture, so you see what I look like. So why are we here? We're actually here to talk about data science in healthcare. So initially, I thought I'll be talking about demystifying machine learning, which I feel is top most of my skill set, but it seems we want to talk about healthcare, and I think it's important as well to diversify and see applications of data science in variety of fields and domains. So it's a good time to talk about data science in healthcare, since I've actually done a lot of things regards data science in healthcare. But before then, let's try to see what exactly is data science. So I actually saw this piece online that says data science is an automated, machine-based way to extract meaningful insights from big amounts of data. So actually, in a nutshell, what this is trying to say is, you see, you have enormous amount of data. You probably don't know what to do with it. So you hoping that the data will help you to make informed decisions. So before today, a lot of people make decisions from heuristics, from guessing, from history. For instance, a farmer will say, when it's so time of the month, we normally go and weed the farm. So these are traditional practices that have been ongoing in the entire family generation for ages. But you see, data science can come and say, no, this is the exact time you should go and do the weeding. this is the exact amount of fertilizer that your crops will need. So that is the kind of things that data science would help you do. So I found this very, very interesting. I say, I want answers, call the data scientist right now. So we would like to say we have known what data science is, but who is actually a data scientist? So I kind of find this also useful. Initially, I saw this picture with just the lady, but we're talking about gender equality and the rest of it. I had to look for the one that had both male and female so that we will know that the field of data science is not gender biased. So you can see that a data scientist is somebody who has a cocktail of skills in maths and statistics, programming, communication, domain knowledge, and soft skills, all combined together to make one person who is called a data scientist. And of course, it's not a it's no longer a hidden thought that data science is now the sexiest job of the 21st century. Also, I think I find this definition of a data scientist better amusing. It says a data scientist is someone who does precision guess work based on unreliable data provided by those of questionable knowledge. So they're just trying to tell us that these guys called data scientists, they do a lot of amazing things with data. Data comes very, very dirty in the real world. And these guys have found a way to transform this dirty data into meaningful insights. And that is why probably they will be termed as wizards or magicians. So let's quickly look at the data science process in the real world. From the real world, you collect data. You see, data science is thriving now because data is now enormous. Reports and research are saying, like for instance, Google is saying they are storing and processing petabytes of data each day. And so you see, when this raw data is collected, it is then passed through some data processing pipeline or mechanism that will process this data to probably prepare it for the next level of analysis in the chain in the pipeline. So you don't do just analysis with any kind of data because most of the times, like I said earlier, this data is always coming dirty. So there's always a session where you actually clean this data to be fit for purpose. So for the analysis guys, they normally do some exploratory data analysis in this data. I don't know if you can see my mouse. This is where I am. So exploratory data analysis is just exploring your data to find whether there are trends or patterns in this data that can be useful for further analysis or further processing. Some from that angle, they take it next directly to the machine learning model or algorithm, while some from cleaning directly, they go straight to the machine learning model. And of course, the machine learning model helps you make uh, get insights or predictions from your data, and then you should be able to communicate this data to your stakeholders. And of course, how do you communicate this data? Maybe by building some visualizations or some other form of report style. Then you present to your stakeholders. And then at the end of the day, from what you give to them, they make decisions. So at the end of the day, these decisions is going to affect the people back in the real world scenario. That's why you see when you say you build data products and then it is now useful in the real world. So a lot of people tend to ask, where do we draw the line between a data scientist, a data analyst, a data engineer, and maybe a machine learning engineer? So I put this piece to show you in pictures the distinction between these guys. So in summary, the data science process is actually from collection of data, cleaning of data, exploratory data analysis, model building, and finally model deployment, which is actually very, very important because you don't just do all these things without putting it to use in the real world. So the set of guys that are specialists in collecting this data and cleaning this data, we refer to them as data engineers. So they build pipelines, set up infrastructure to collect this data from variety of sources and they bring it forth and prepare it for data analysts to use. So data analysts also, they do some form of cleaning, and mostly their job is to explore this data and find insights, trends, patterns in this data. Once they end there, so these guys are specialists, we call them data analysts. Machine learning engineers, on the other hand, they do model building, like transforming your data to give maybe some predictions of what whatever the case may be in terms of the problem statement. These guys will build a model that either will classify your data or make some predictions from your data, or group your data, that is clustering your data. They do this kind of stuff and then send it forth for use in the real world. Call them machine learning engineers. And then here comes a data scientist. This is the mother of them all, someone who does all these from beginning to the end. We call them data scientists. I believe many of us here actually want to be data scientists. So to the topic of the day is applications of data science in healthcare. We can see that data science today is in use in areas of genetics, data management in the hospital or healthcare, drug discovery, virtual assistants. The previous speaker was talking about looking at images of leaves to say whether this is good or this is healthy or not, which is image analysis, and then the predictive analysis. So in detail, examples that you can find is data science is helping researchers, physicians, and stakeholders in the health industry to find new ways to either treat, cure, and in some cases even prevent disorders or people from falling sick or getting diseases. Today, we hear a lot of brain disorders, and that is one of the space in which data science is finding use as of today, because the brain is very technical, and finding experts that can dissect the brain by looking at the picture of the brain, it's difficult. But today, some advanced deep neural networks is helping us, to mention convolutional neural networks are helping us to actually analyze these images and say whether the brain is having a particular disorder or not. And there are industries that are investing deeply in this field today. They give money to people to develop algorithms, for instance, that can predict the number of days, for instance, a patient will spend in the hospital. So I'd like to quickly talk about the kind of outcomes you will get when you analyze healthcare data. So, for instance, one of them is going to be an economic cost outcome. That is, when you analyze healthcare data, it helps in aspects of economy, in the sense that maybe optimizing or minimizing your cost, or optimizing how you distribute your resources in the healthcare, so that it will avoid wastage. Another aspect is in diagnostics. These diagnostics, we'll look at it in probably three stages. You do diagnostics to tell whether there is presence of disease in a particular case that you are studying. You do diagnostics to check whether, yes, there is a disease, but what type of disease is this? And then you also do diagnosis to say, if there is a disease, how serious is the disease? So if you're following, you discover that with the economic cost, it's probably a type of regression program. I believe you've heard about regression. Since I'm not really talking about machine learning, I will not go deep into that. And then for presence of a disease, if you look closely, you will discover that it is some kind of but we say, is there a disease or there is no disease? So it's a binary type of outcome, and it's a classification problem that you use, maybe logistic regression or any of the decision trees. And then for type of diseases, you can discover that this is also a classification problem, where you look at the data and classify whether this disease belongs to this class. Maybe an example would be the hepatitis case, whether it's hepatitis A or hepatitis B or C. So those are classes of hepatitis. So also, how serious is the disease is an example of an ordinal outcome, in the sense that you say, is this a critical problem? How critical is the problem? Very critical, or not critical per se, in terms of ranking the level of criticality that problem is. I would like to look at us as a case study. Boniface mentioned Kaduna State earlier when he was introducing me. So Kaduna State actually launches a data science fellowship program to operationalize the data revolution plan. So in a nutshell, what this is saying is that Kaduna State, the government of Kaduna State has thought and said, look, we don't want to be doing or making decisions from heuristics like I mentioned earlier. Let's allow this data to drive our decisions. So one of the key application of this decision is in utilization of resources in our hospitals. So uh, there's a link I probably will share. Somehow I forgot to put the link in the slide. Maybe I'll share it later. It's called HEFA. So it's Health Facilities Analytics. Kaduna State government using us made that analytics for the healthcare facilities that we have. So it's allowing us to know the distribution of healthcare facilities, the number of doctors in each facility, or number of staff manning those facilities, facilities that are understaffed or overstaffed. How do we redistribute these staff? So another very important case study for us here is the COVID-19. When the COVID-19 struck, almost all nations were caught unaware. Kaduna State at that point in time were luckily started this data revolution before then. So what we did, we set up an infrastructure to collect data at multiple entry points into Kaduna State, and we analyze this data in case anybody is found with COVID. It will be easy for us to trace these people and find their contacts, people they have made contact with in various points of entries that they have, people they have met with. So Kaduna State is not on lockdown today because they are actually using data to drive the decision to say whether the state will be on lockdown or not. The true positivity rate that was adopted by the team of experts in Kaduna State says if we do our analysis and prediction of the positivity rate for COVID-19 in Kaduna State, if it is beyond 15%, we should allow the state government to enforce a lockdown in the state. And so far, so good. The true positivity rate for COVID-19 in Kaduna State has always been less than 7%, and that is why people are working freely today in Kaduna State without being locked down. So you can see one wonderful application of data science in healthcare and how governments are using it to make their day-to-day decisions as they run their government. So I will round up by saying, what exactly can data science do for you? It can increase your revenue. It can provide insight for you. It can develop or help you discover new features in whatever you are doing. It can improve your operations, and then it can open further markets for you. I don't know. I have probably rounded up the things I have to say to you guys, and I would like to say, leave the remaining time that I have to answer any specific questions that you will have for me. Thank you for your listening.
So thank you very much, Daniel, for that wonderful presentation on application of data science on healthcare. I will allow maybe 2 or 3 questions, then you can proceed from the audience. Any question? Any particular question for Daniel? So Daniel, looks like you've done a good job down here. There's no question for you. And we'd like to once again thank you very much for that wonderful presentation.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Daniel.
Back to you, Lindsay.
Okay, so if we're ready, and again, I'd just like to say thanks very much to Daniel. That was a wonderful presentation. It was really thorough. I have a talk from Dr. Carolina Odman-Govender from IDEA, who will talk about data science. Are you ready for me to share that?
Sure, I should go on.
Okay, thank you.
Lindsay, I will introduce Dr. Govender just and then you can share. Dr. Carolina Odman-Govender is a professor of astronomy at the University of Western Cape. She's very interested, for those of you who do astronomy, she's very interested in cosmology, specifically dark energy. She's also very interested in compute and computational power. She's a member of the Inter-University Institute for Data Intensive Astronomy. As those of you with some astronomy knowledge or roughly familiar with astronomy, there is the SKA, the Square Kilometer Array, coming to Africa. This is a data-intensive project and therefore needs very data-intensive infrastructure and people to work on analyzing data. So basically data scientists. So Dr. Carolina will present. I think we are ready, Lindsay.
Hi, my name is Carolina Odman, and I'm very happy to be telling you today about data science in industry. So when we talk about data science in industry, it really is a lot of different jobs, if you will. So what's a data scientist? You know, a data scientist is somebody who is sometimes an engineer, sometimes a scientist, sometimes a computer scientist, sometimes a security professional. So data science is really something that has grown so much over the past 15 years. And with it, so there's specializations that have emerged with slightly different skill sets. So I'm going to go through some of these professional profiles that have grown out of data science so far. And first, I'm going to start again because I coughed. Hi. Okay, my name is Carolina Odman, and today I'm going to tell you a little bit more about data science careers in industry. Data science is a field that has grown tremendously in the last 15 years or so, and data scientist has become a thing, really. But to such an extent, it's become so important and so in demand in industry that several specializations have emerged out of it, which are with slightly different skill sets and slightly different priorities. So if you want to be a data scientist, really, but you prefer, working on computers, there's something for you. If you're a data scientist, but you prefer data visualization, there's something for you as well. Data science is now really, really broad. So here are some of the professional profiles that have emerged. So a data scientist is really an analyst, someone who analyzes big data. And in industry, that will be for the purposes of, say, enhancing productivity or making a company more effective, creating value, and analyzing any data to sort of optimize processes and products and so on. So a data scientist, what they do is they ask questions, they devise experiments to test hypotheses, so hypothetical answers to those questions, and figures out what a company can do to thrive based on what the data reveals. So there's a lot of analysis. You must be an experimenter, and you have to often visualize data to be able to gain more clues into what the data tells you. And so in the end, your job is to discover insights and make them actionable. So that means that the company is able to take an action based on what you've discovered. Then there's more data engineering. So a data engineer is a person who is more in charge of designing and building the platform that collects, cleans, possibly pre-analyzes and stores data. So that means you have to be comfortable around databases. There's lots of different types of databases. And it's really, really a very interesting field, databases, to be honest. So you'll be able to ingest data, to build systems that can hold the data and store it, but also build pipelines so that the data can be used by the data scientists to gain their insights. So this is really not trivial. There's lots of like technical trade-offs, for example, to build systems that are both fast and reliable and robust. And so imagine, for example, you want something to be really, really fast, but you have to spread it around the world. So you have to take into account the time it takes for your database to replicate around the world. Then there are things that, no, but maybe you want to be reliable. So instead of having a quick replication without making sure that everything's right, you have to make sure that it's reliable, and you have master and so on. So there's lots of different approaches to those things. So these are, trade-offs. And so it's a very interesting field. And without data platforms, of course, one cannot do data science. Another aspect I want to mention is DevOps. So this is neither data engineering nor data science analysis, if you will. DevOps is different from data engineering in that it's working on the operations, right? So this is the live deployment on platforms. You have to make sure that your platforms are ready and work, that you don't have bugs, in the live systems. That's really one of the key expectations in industry, is that you develop something, and when you put it in production, as it's called, it's working, that it doesn't fail. It's been tested before, but you are on the operational side, so you work on what's live, right? So you have to work. You have to be comfortable, for example, with software containerization, with cloud computing, how to scale your platforms, how to deploy them, how to monitor them. So it contains also, reliability engineering, scheduling, scaling, and things like that. So it's also a very, very interesting field. But it's a bit like the front line of data science, especially if it's time sensitive. So, for example, a social network, you want to get posts up and running, and you want them to be visible for everyone. It's a bit of a front line, on the spot, being available 24/7 if there's something that breaks. So it's a very intensive job, but a lot of fun as well. And then I want to mention security. The security of data is really, really important in industry. It's critical to any system. And it's, data breaches can cause irreparable damages to a company. Cyber attacks, any company can be subject of cyber attacks. And if you don't have a good security system around your data and your data pipelines and your information systems, you are very vulnerable. You're vulnerable to, for example, ransomware, where hackers come and they cripple your systems. And it's not until you've paid them some crazy amount of money, often in things like Bitcoin, to make it untraceable, that then they will release the system. But you don't even know after you pay if they'll release the system. So better have the security in place to avoid those attacks in the first place. But cyber attacks is not just exclusivity of hackers. There's even governments that engage in it, and they use it to weaken economic players and infrastructure in countries that they consider adversary, for example. So cybersecurity is very, very important. So the things that you will do if you work in security, for example, you learn cryptography, and that is a lot of fun. Compliance, you have to comply things, and that's very difficult. And ethics play a role. What's ethical, and there's legal considerations, in terms of responsibilities in case something breaks and so on. And so there's often a trade-off between doing what's easy and doing what's right. But security is a really fascinating field. So these are really essentially layers of professions, right? And every layer depends on the other, right? So there's also many more roles that data scientists interact with in their daily jobs, and they require many other skills, such as you need to be a good communicator, you need to be able to create effective data visualizations that communicate to people who aren't necessarily used to working with data. So, and you need to have some, you'll work with people who design user experiences, for example. You'll work with marketing people and so on. And of course, I put security vertically there because security pervades all of those layers and beyond. So yeah, so that's the sort of professions you'll find in data science. So some tools of the trade of data science. So the big one is, of course, artificial intelligence, right? And so the areas of opportunity, if AI is your thing, where they use it a lot is in computer vision, right? So from medical imaging to Earth observation, from satellites and drones and things, all of this. There's also more and more capability, and it'll be more prevalent in the future, is video analysis. So computer vision, so analyzing video in real time using artificial intelligence. So currently, the big platforms are able to, identify a pet, identify a person, identify a face recognition in your cell phone camera, for example. That's AI. But in the future, those capabilities will be more and more enhanced, right? Here is also where reinforcement learning is a very interesting skill. So this is, for example, for game playing artificial intelligence and autonomous vehicles, self-driving cars, self-driving trucks and buses and things like that. They work a lot with reinforcement learning. Unsupervised learning is about finding patterns in data. So there's a very, very interesting tech there called GANs, Generative Adversarial Network. So this is two neural networks who basically fight one another, and that accelerates their learning a lot so that they can become very artificially intelligent much faster than just training based on data that you know. And it's also a very, very interesting part of artificial intelligence. And obviously, cybersecurity, creating artificial intelligence that can maybe have a good sense of prediction of, say, what financial transactions might be fraudulent or legitimate. The Internet of Things, having sensors everywhere, we need to be able to understand what's going on, and surveillance, all of those make use of unsupervised learning. And then scalable learning, this works for, say, distributed model and edge AI and parallelization. So this is where, instead of having a network of sensors, for example, that all connect to a computer and that computer does all the AI, you have little chips out there at the edge and they do their own AI. But scalable learning, how can you make sure that they learn from the other sensors without having to do it centrally, right? And so this is another aspect of growth in artificial intelligence. So AI has lots of interesting problems going on at the moment that you can work on. I wanted to mention blockchain as a technology, right? So blockchain is also known as decentralized consensus technologies, right? So this is a technology behind cryptocurrencies, so Bitcoin and those. So it creates self-securing, decentralized systems where trust is an emergent property of the system. So you don't rely on an authority like a person or a central bank or a master database or whatever to certify the validity of, say, a transaction, but trust comes out of the system. The system itself checks itself, right? And so this is a very fundamental new technology because it digitizes trust in transactions. And most businesses are transactional, right? So if you work in the private sector, any sale is a transaction. You exchange value in the form of goods and services, right? What's interesting with blockchain is that it also ensures data sovereignty. So that means that you don't have to give your data away. You can, your data is yours, right? So the key skills that if you want to work using blockchain technologies is cryptography, again, which is a lot of fun. I think I said that before, and game theory, right? So those are really interesting skills for blockchain technologies. Now, a day on the job. What do you do as a data scientist? Like we've spoken about, what it involves, what you need to know, what you get to do. But on a normal day, what do you do, right? So there's a lot of teamwork, right? There's a lot of teamwork. There's a lot of communication. You have to sync with everyone. You have to know what the business wants with their data science, but it's also often exploratory. So you'll get some data, you'll explore, and then you can come back to the business people and say, well, from this, we can figure this out and maybe that out. And, you can explore. But a lot of businesses currently, especially smaller businesses, are unaware of the potential that their data has, right? And so leadership currently is often not that data literate. So that puts the emphasis again on the ability to communicate and to make people who don't understand data science realize what data science can do for them and for the business, right? A lot of the time, most of the time is spent cleaning data. So you'll get data, but then you have to, for example, people have put things in by hand, then there will be typos. Sometimes there will be spaces. And so like you have to clean up the data and make it nice and neat so that it can be digested by data analysis scripts. And when cleaning data, often you won't, some of it will be by hand, but often you'll write scripts to clean the data. And there's lots of great technologies for that. And also a day on the job requires you to know what the business is about, right? And that's called domain knowledge, right? So if you are a data scientist, data science is so universal that you can change fields. You can work in, medical insurance one day, and then you'll work in financial services, and then suddenly you'll work in retail. And each of these will have their own domain knowledge. And the great thing if you migrate like that as a data scientist is that you acquire a lot of domain knowledge. You learn every time you work in a new environment. But you also need to rely on the people who have the domain knowledge to help you make sense of the data analysis that you will do. And most of the work actually is in analytics. So very little machine learning or artificial intelligence is currently implemented in most businesses because sometimes there's not enough data, and often there's not enough labeled data. And labeled data is key to train machine learning algorithms. And you also need a lot of computing power for it. So a lot of the exploration data still happens in spreadsheets and visualization, but doesn't preclude the bigger technologies like AI and blockchain from being relevant sometime in the future. So it's always good to be abreast of the technology. So what transferable skills do you get from science that you can, with your science degree, get a data science job in industry? Well, firstly, if you're good at mathematics, specifically in applied statistics and the mathematics of cryptography, that is brilliant. That's really, really good. Computer programming is essential. You need to be able to be comfortable. Most people use Python, actually. But it's good to know also, what are good machine learning libraries, for example, TensorFlow or Pandas and things like that. So yeah, computer programming is important. Data analytics, that's the ability to analyze data. Know that it's probably not a good idea to make a pie chart for 25 categories, but rather do a bar chart, for example. So have those abilities, know how to analyze data and how to visualize it in a suitable way. And also big picture thinking. This is something that you get from science. When we try to understand what's going on in the universe, for example, there's a lot of things happening. Trying to understand the galaxy is, it's nuclear physics, it's magnetohydrodynamics, it's plasma physics, and so you have to be able to bring the big picture back into what you're analyzing, and you have to bring the fruits of your analysis into the big picture. And that's something that you learn in science. So, and the final thing is the ability to learn. I mentioned domain knowledge before. You need to know what each business is doing. So domain knowledge, like if you're able to learn quickly or learn a new technology quickly, or learning a new programming language, or how to use a new library, a new visualization software and so on, the ability to learn is something that you're honing through your science studies, and it's really important. Now, Here are some industry skills and practices that if you come straight from academia, you may not have been become familiar with. And so I really recommend that if you want to work in the private sector as a scientist, you read up on these. So Agile, Scrum, what sprints are, learn terms like development, staging, production, and learn. So I do recommend these two websites, cognitiveclass.ai and Zindi.Africa. Zindi.Africa is a wonderful platform that has regular data science challenges that are open, that are sometimes set by a private sector company, and there's prize money, but otherwise it's also for good causes. And you can take part in these online competitions. The more you do, the better you'll get. Practice makes perfect, like everywhere else. So now you know how to become a successful data scientist in industry. You just study a science, you learn some of the industry practices, you stay open-minded, you trust in your capacity to learn, and be aware that the skills that you learn in science, you can translate them into industry. And so you may find yourself, in a forest of possible careers, that has been brought about by the fourth industrial revolution, this big technological revolution that we're experiencing, where things like the Internet of Things suddenly makes it that there's sensors everywhere, and you can do so much with it that we can't even think about. So some careers are more scientific, some are more engineering, some involve research, some are very close to the ground, optimizing a retail business. What does the person want to buy when they walk into the shop, right? Those kind of things. All of that you can do, right? And whatever your inclination, whether you want to help small businesses on their digital transformation journey, or you want to apply brand new research and technologies to the real world, you can find your feet, right? So with all of that, I'll just leave you with this. Remember that the humblest of spreadsheets can still probably reveal new knowledge and insight. And with all of that, I wish you the best of luck, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.